Chess.com strongly condemns Russia's invasion and war against Ukraine. Ukraine is a great nation, a great chess nation, and we are daily saddened by the senseless suffering inflicted upon Ukrainians by the Russian government and its military. After careful consideration, with input from across our community and our leadership team, we are electing to keep our servers and events open to Russian players. We believe that isolation of ordinary Russian citizens only makes it easier for autocracy and propaganda to rule in Russia. However, we cannot support symbols and speech representing Russia and its war in Ukraine. For this reason, on our server and in all of our events going forward, including the one you are about to watch, Chess.com will no longer be displaying the Russian flag for any players. Additionally, we are replacing the Russian flag across our entire website with a new neutral blue flag that links directly to our policy on the war. We are electing to use our platform to communicate truth and provide information on how to support Ukraine rather than isolate Russian citizens further. For more information on our position, our actions, and ways you can support Ukraine, type the command Ukraine in chat or visit the link directly shared by one of our moderators right now. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you around on chess.com.
Welcome everyone to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. I am thrilled to be leading the show with another Anna. This is the double Anna show from today on. Anna Maya, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you so much, and I'm so excited to be hosting the Rapid Chess Championship together with you. I've been dreaming about having a double Anna show, so I'm really excited to be hosting it together with you, and we have amazing games lined up today.
Absolutely. It's one of those weekends that you cannot miss. Every single weekend, the Rapid Chess Championship have been thrilling. And we will first take a look at the leaderboard because after so many weeks, 11 weeks of competition, take a look at this Anamaya. We've got Hikaru Nakamura and Fabiano Caruana, 50 points, both of them.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. It's a big score already. And we know that the top 8 qualifies well, today we have the top 8 qualifying to the finals, but those Grand Prix points matter a lot as well for the very final, Anna.
Exactly. They matter a lot for the finals. They matter a lot for the prizes. As we can see, Hikaru has already won nearly $30,000. Today, we will see those Grand Prix points divided as follows. The first place gets 10 points, second place 7 points, and so on. But what Anna Maya mentioned is the most important about today's standings, that after the end of the arena, the 3-0 Blitz games, the top 8 players will qualify to tomorrow's Sunday knockout, where the prices will be even higher, with the first place being $7,500. That's a lot of cash at stake, Anna Maya.
Indeed, that's a lot of prize money. So it's a really amazing event, Anna. And we know that the top 100 players in the world are participating to this event. We have the top 10 juniors as well as the top 10 women, and also 10 wildcards have been given out by Chess.com. So it's a high level event. It's very stacked. So I'm really looking forward to today's event.
Likewise, Anna Maya, and of course, as usual, we would not be able to host an event like this without an amazing sponsor. So thanks so much to Coinbase for sponsoring the Rapid Chess Championship. This event is brought to you by Coinbase. Whether you're looking to make your first crypto purchase or you're an experienced trader, Coinbase has you covered. Earn crypto by learning about crypto with Coinbase Earn, explore DeFi and Web3 with Coinbase Wallet, get exclusive rewards when you spend with Coinbase Card, and much, much more. Learn more about Coinbase at coinbase.com/chess and get $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up and verify your account. That is how easy it is to make money, Anna Maya. You verify you're a human being and you get your $10 in Bitcoin.
Indeed.
What you guys are waiting for, right?
It's as simple as that, indeed.
We'll be back with the action, the live action right here on your Saturday show of the Rapid Chess Championship after a very short break. Don't go anywhere. The double Anna show and the double Pink Chair show will be back in a moment.
See the bit.
Welcome back, everyone, to the broadcast of the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. We have our lovely webcams on display here. I always love to see the players right before the round begins. Anna Maya, there's so much concentration already, and last-minute snags by Anish Giri. Alexander Bornik just started shaking his head as Anish started eating. Are they looking at each other? What do you think?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I guess they are like kind of like exploring a little bit, maybe even like doing some puzzle rushes just before the start. But yeah, it is dinner time in the Netherlands, so I can imagine that's why Anish Giri is eating some snacks right now.
It's definitely an interesting point, the time zones and the different continents the players are tuning in from. As you mentioned,
Right.
It's dinner time for Anish, but for Vidit, it's almost nighttime in India.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Americans, it's well, it's afternoon, maybe even morning. So yeah, it's crazy how different it can be.
The games are about to start, so whether it's a last-minute dinner, snack, or even their morning coffee, as you mentioned, for some of the players tuning in or playing from the US, we have now our first move on the board, d4 against Anish Giri. If you can let us know about the player with the white pieces here, Anna.
Oh, it's Lim Lei.
The fonts are so small on my screen that I couldn't guess it from the profile picture. So thank you.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, we'll make sure that you can know who's playing with the white pieces. But yeah, it's Lim Lei playing as Anish Giri, and yeah, they're playing very quickly so far. Of course, the time control is 10+0, so there's no increment. So if you have a good time management, you have already like a nice head start for the rest of the game.
I'm just realizing that I think I said 3-0 earlier accidentally because I was focusing on that there is no increment, but obviously it's a 10-0, not 10. So not 3-0. I don't know if I'm explaining myself, but I'm already confused with numbers. Big difference, though, as Anna Maya pointed out, that today there is no increment. Tomorrow there will be increment, but only the top 8 players from today will make it to tomorrow. So you gotta be fast, and flagging skills will actually matter at the end of each game, of course, as we have seen every single Saturday.
Indeed, Anna, don't worry about it. It is a really rare time control 10+0. We do not see this often, which is why the Rapid Chess Championship is so unique in itself. So we see now in this position, it was a King's Indian defense. Are you familiar with this opening, Anna?
I don't play it with either color, but I, of course, have seen grandmasters playing it, and understanding it much better than me. Because for me, the King's Indian is like, I don't know enough about attack, and everything else is just like space advantage for white. So if your attack will not succeed, your counter attack, then you're doomed.
Yeah, exactly. I have the same. I tend to play with the white pieces sometimes. It could be some change of moves, like it could go because I play 1e4. It could transpose to some sort of from the Perch defense, some similar positions like that. But basically, yeah, I have the same kind of issue. I typically don't play this. So we see that white has a really nice development and a lot of space, but at the same time, black has a lot of counterplay. And you see that black will be able to move this knight around either to e5 or b6, but typically to e5, as that is one of the main squares of the knight in that position. And now we see knight e1. Now it looks a bit strange, like right, Anna, but knight e1 is with the reasoning because, well, you want to play either f3. You also might want to consider trading the bishops by either bishop f3 or bishop d3, but typically they move the knight because they want to play f3 or move the knight elsewhere.
Yeah, I wonder, did you see Anime for a moment, the valuation bar jumped as soon as Anish played knight to d7? Was there a way to trap the bishop the
Oh yeah,
e4
let's have a
bishop.
look actually. Wait, you're absolutely right. As I was saying, F3 was actually the move because after, let me show that real quick. After F3, there was bishop F5. And with G4, you're trapping the bishop.
And
It's
white played
incredible
knight
to see that it was
E1.
missed in the
Yeah.
rapid format.
It's incredible it was missed after white has just played knight e1, so you assume that they wanted to push the f pawn, but maybe it was more about f4 in case black pushes f5. F3, g4 would have already trapped the bishop. Now after bishop d3, of course, it's an exchange of pieces, not winning the piece.
Yeah, that's already really surprising to see. You do not see such simple tactics missed at such high levels. So at least we can relate in some way that this also happens at a very high level.
Wow, and now that moment was missed, black is just completely fine. After the knight has been developed, b4 is offering a trade of pawns and trying to open up the b5 for white's rook. At the same time, it feels like Anish should have quite a few options here. What would you consider? He played fast. I was like, will he push the b pawn or not? b6. So in case of b6, c5, he can take back with either pawns, to be fair, because the pawn will no longer be hanging.
Absolutely, Anna. Yeah, Anish replied your question for me already. B6 is what he played. And now queen c2, putting more pressure on this bishop on e4. Now, would you want to go for this trade on d3, or would you rather go for a more defensive move like f5 or even queen h4? Really nice to see such an aggressive move being played.
Yeah, I love queen h4, and we have just gotten a very important and interesting piece of information from our behind the scenes team that Anish and Lek van Guillem have never ever played at any time control.
Wow.
You would assume that these top GMs, they have faced each other at least a few times, either in classical or rapid events, over the board or online, but in some kind of an event, in some time control. These two have never ever played each other according to our database and according to our team. Thank you so much for the research there.
Wow, that's impressive. You rarely hear this indeed. And thank you so much for providing this piece of information indeed.
Yeah, I'm being told that I might have over exaggerated that classical could actually be the case that they played, but it was just chess.com games. Either case, it's exciting.
It counts for something, Anna.
The chess.com accounts have never faced each other at any time control.
Absolutely. We see now g3 being played, and I'm slightly worried about the king, but at the same time, the bishop on e4 is having some problems because now you are indeed forced to take on d3 because the queen was under attack. And if the queen has to leave, it either has to retreat all the way back to, for example, e7, but now it's on e4. And the bishops were traded off. Otherwise, there was going to be a problem with the bishop on e4.
Very true. And now what we see is a very cozy queen in the middle of the board. I think Anish's chances have improved. And just as I said it, have I jinxed it? The evaluation bar is going up again, showing a bit of advantage for white.
Yeah, it looks like b6 is a bit premature because almost all the pawns on the queen side are hanging now. Knight takes c5, and soon we will probably see c takes b5 being followed, unless black decides to take on c4 themselves, but that will just be pawn trade. So now knight takes c5, and it's just blundering a pawn with no counterplay as far as I can tell.
I know that I should not have said that black is not doing better. I have a tendency of jinxing the players, especially when I'm somewhat biased for having one of my best friends, Sopiko, being married to Anish. So I'm totally not cheerleading here, but Anish, pull yourself together.
Yeah, your words of encouragement. I wish he could actually hear those, but yeah, I'm really happy to see, okay, it's okay to be slightly biased sometimes. It's okay.
Now, white with a clear pawn up and those menacing pass pawns, because let's not forget about the d5 pawn that stayed on the board and is a pass pawn. The c pawn too could be a pass pawn once that knight gets out of the way and you push it to c5.
Absolutely. Yeah. Black is in trouble here, and I'm not seeing a way to gain counterplay here. Knight b6 is a nice attempt to try to put pressure on the pawns in the center. So yeah, I'm really liking what he's doing here. I'm trying to figure out, because the thing is about knight e6, it looks a bit scary because you're putting the knight right on the diagonal of the bishop, which is why now knight takes a6 has been played.
So knight takes a6, and if rook takes a6, the pawn will take on b5, attacking the rook, chasing it away from the defense of the b6 knight, winning the piece back.
Absolutely, Anna, and that is a really nice tactic, which is why knight takes c4 has been played, gaining pawn back, but sacrificing an exchange. Actually, there's knight a3.
Both
I just missed it.
are winning an exchange. The knight fork here, knight fork there. Now white will win the rook back, the exchange back, and everyone is happy because it's just gonna be an end game. Let's see what happens once the smoke clears out from this room that they are playing in. It looks like knight takes a8. What's the material count?
Yeah, I see that rook a3 now, and black is regaining the pawn. Now, let's have a look, Anna, because we're going to switch real quick to see how the players are doing on the cameras. We see that Liam is really focused, and we see Grishuk be, holding his head with his hand. I love seeing those kind of views, Anna. What do you think?
Yeah, both Grishik and Dubov have a very similar near forehead cam at the moment, or at least the very close up. While Anish, you can see Anish right in the middle. Next to him, to the right, is his opponent, Grandmaster Lek Van Liam. Liam has chosen an interesting backdrop. I like to see when they play around with their webcams on the Zoom call and they choose something exciting. Or in Anish's case, it's just a beautiful room he's sitting in. I love the design.
Yeah, me too, Anna. And yeah, Liam did choose for this kind of like a green screen background, unless he's really at the Northern Lights.
Oh, that would be amazing, of course.
Yeah, imagine if we have someone actually play from like such a really cool atmosphere around. But I really like Anish's room, indeed.
Yeah, and the game has just ended in a draw. We will show it to you as soon as we can get our board back. We had to make sure that we have everything covered when it comes to the setup, and the game petered out to a draw. Actually, after the knight forks happened, there wasn't much happening, and he just gained the pawn back on a2. So it is a missed chance for Lek Van Liam. He was up a pawn, but then he didn't find the most precise defense, and Anish managed to save that game. A good start, because you don't want to fall behind in this event. There's no easy opponent, so falling behind is not really a good option.
Yeah, typically you would say, like, when the Swiss tournament, you would say that, okay, you did not score win the first round, you will play a bit of a weaker opponent in the next round. But no, this is a very stacked tournament. You're playing against strong players every single round. So losing a half point in the first round is not a big deal. But you definitely need to get some wins going at some point. So we're now looking at the game of Hikaru. I believe he's playing against Arjun Ergaisi. So let's have a look how they are doing. Okay, I see that the position is pretty balanced, but it feels like Hikaru is pushing a lot here. Obviously, we need to be worried about this pawn on b3. But yeah, so far, Hikaru seems to be doing fine, as he's putting a lot of pressure on this pawn on f7. What can Arjun do? And he goes for b2. He believes in the power of the pawn.
He believes in it, and he queens. He promotes with b1. Now there's two queens on the board for black, but one of them is straight out hanging thanks to the pawn on e5. And there's a discover check coming in if the rook moves away.
Indeed. So yeah, now indeed rook f1 check should be winning the game already, because you will simply be ahead on material. I believe it's very complicated, Anna. It's very sharp. Having three queens on the board is not easy to deal with.
I know, but luckily for us, and luckily for the player with the white pieces, it's Hikaru, and I think he already has it figured out. Look at him. He's confident. He's explaining his calculation to his viewers. Oh, wait, did I jinx it? Anna, you need to stop me.
Okay, he has played rook f1 check. So the thing here is that you're giving a check on g8. Well, with the bishop from d5, and like you're seeing that, okay, there's all the queens are actually under attack. But what is happening here is that, first of all, you need to sort out the check. You can consider, oh, well, there's a resignation already. I don't even need to explain anymore. But just to keep the game going here, if you decide to take the bishop with your queen to at least save that queen, you will you'll get to capture it back. Queen takes d5 check, and then your next queen will fall. And yeah, because both queens are hanging, it's just impossible to save the position.
I loved how your commentary was almost fully in sync with Hikaru's face cam, because he was analyzing it and looking up. It was like an Anamaya voiceover for Hikaru. So female voice and Hikaru's face cam. An interesting mix. I love it. Do you want to continue, Anamaya? He's back.
Okay, he's back. Okay, he's I think he's going through the game altogether just to analyze what happened throughout the middle game and the opening. Yeah, and I think he's just setting up for the next game already, because obviously, since it's a Swiss game, Swiss format, you have to wait till all the players have finished their first game, and then the next round starts. So there's plenty of time for the players to analyze the games, go through their mistakes and such. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also plenty of time. Exactly. I was just going to add that there's also plenty of time in case your game finished early. Like Anish Giri drew his game relatively early against Lek Wangliam. He has left already for maybe another snack. Lek Wangliam too is stretching a little bit, while you can see that some of the other players are clearly still in game. Oh, Jan Nepomniachtchi is about to have a guest. Is that? Did you see? There was something moving behind him.
I couldn't see. Oh, maybe he's moving around now.
Does he have a cat or a dog? There's someone. Oh, that's so cute.
Oh, that's really adorable. I think it was a dog.
Yeah. Oh, I love to see the behind the scenes. That this is the closest you can get to chess grandmasters. Obviously, when they play over the board events, they have to fly to the location. They stay in hotels, so you don't get to see them this close, this up close and personal. Now you're inside their homes. And we have just met Jan Nepomniachtchi's dog. I didn't even know he was a dog owner. I know of Wesley's cat. So there are some more famous pets. That's Wesley's cat, Aronyan's dog, and so on and so on. But Nepomniachtchi, wow, that was an adorable dog.
Absolutely, Anna. And what I really like is the personal aspect of the tournament. Like, it's another thing to just have those games going. And like, as you mentioned, they are playing from home. It's so more personal. And we also get to see from those camps, like what's going on, like backstage, you know, during their games, or like maybe one of their pets shows up. So that's really, really amazing. And that's how you get to know more about the players too.
Exactly. Some of them are still in their first round game. So let's just get back to our board now with Daniel Dubov here having the white pieces against Vladislav Kovalev. Rook f7 seems like a strong move because it attacks the queen and is also threatening the pawn on f5. But when we do the count of material, there's already a bishop missing from white's position.
Indeed, Anna. And I think the problem is, you would say that black is winning because of they have a bishop and they're up material. But the problem here for black is that they don't have enough pawns to convert the position. They have 3 pawns on the king side. You would say that should be enough, right? But it's really difficult to make use of those pawns. And once everything will be traded off, now the rooks have been traded off, it will be very difficult to convert this to a win. So that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult for black to convert this to something, and why the engine is also saying it should be a draw.
Very true. And I was just quickly taking a look at the color of the corner. I know we are very far from a bishop endgame, but even if black manages to get to a bishop endgame where they would have a rook pass pawn, so it could be just a pawn and the bishop for black, nothing for white, it would still be a draw because the color of the corner is wrong, which is a theoretical, very strange, but very theoretical endgame in a bishop endgame.
Exactly. And I feel like because White has this passed pawn, they're still trying to create some winning chances here because I feel like the bishop is a little bit on the wrong color. What Daniel Dubov has done here is he put all the pawns on dark squares, making it impossible for the bishop to give a check to the white king. And it's actually really good a good way of dealing with this position because now you see the pawn is suddenly moving forward and it's getting a little bit tricky. So now Daniel did allow black to play bishop c5. So in any case, there's always going to be bishop a7. And now we see Anna, they're below 1 minute on the clock. We might see a flag.
Indeed, it's very important that there is no increment. And this is it. These are the final 46 seconds for both players.
Queen d7 check and a7. How do you stop the pawn?
Yeah,
this queen d5 check first.
This was apparently
the bishop
missed by black. Yeah, suddenly in the heat of the time trouble, black has missed this line, and now it's still not completely over, but it is white now up a pawn in the queen endgame, where white can give many checks to not allow the pre-moves, because you cannot really pre-move against checks like that.
Oh man, yeah, it's crazy because obviously the players are aware of the time situation. They have to hurry a lot in this situation, and black is trying as much as they can to make a repetition here, but it's just not possible. The king will just move forward and the queen will save the king from those checks.
At the same time, now it is Dubov who has a bit of less time, and with no increment on the clock, does he need to repeat? What do you think?
Well, I would certainly try to play on. And the worst case, I mean, obviously the worst case is to flag, but I think the worst case, you have no chances of getting checkmate in this position. So you have to play on. And we see Vladislav Kovalev taking his time here. What is he gonna do? Okay. Ooh, there was queen h5 maybe possible. There's
what is getting really close. Threat of checkmate on the back rank. Threat of checkmate.
I said it too soon, Anna.
Look at that! White with 2 extra pawns in the queen endgame finds the only way to lose the game by stepping to h6 with the king, queen h7, checkmate the queen. The queen on g5 is the one that's blocking your way.
Oh my goodness, out of the blue, Vladislav Kovalev checkmating on h7. Who would have thought that was even possible? This is insane.
Daniel Dubov will not believe this just when he already had more time on the clock, 2 extra pawns. It was a completely winning position. If we just roll back those last few moves, Anna Maya, on how the tables turned within no time. White is completely winning, and after queen c2 check, the only square you cannot choose for your king is the one on h6. And unfortunately for Daniel Dubov, that's the square he went to.
Yeah, I think he was going for the same idea as I mentioned before, that after queen h2 check, you go queen h5, and then whatever happens, you move your king over to g6, giving a check to the king, and soon there will be checkmate delivered. So I think that's what he was trying to go for. But this time with the queen on c2, that is just not possible. You can't allow this to happen. Yeah, I'm out of words, Anna. This is incredible. I feel really bad for Daniel Dubov. You do not want to lose a game like this. I really hope he can recover quickly from this and start round 2 with a fresh mind.
Yeah, it will be hard to forget this. He is still shaking his head, and it's going to be a painful defeat for him. Luckily for him, though, and luckily for anyone else who started not so well in today's event, there's many more rounds to go. So the players will be back, and actually they are back already. That game went on for so long. The round 2 has started in the meantime.
Right, Anna, round 2 has started. So we are looking at game of Vidit against Grigory Oparin. And, you know, I just wanted to say quickly that it is so hard to switch from knowing that it's like a 10-minute game. Like you have 10 minutes on the clock and you take it easy, because if you make a mistake, like even like a small inaccuracy, you'll get punished for that very easily, because your opponent has plenty of time to think about their move. But when it gets, when you get below the 1 minute mark, it gets very shaky and it's really hard to make that switch. So I really that's what I love about this tournament. It's so different and the players really need to get adjusted to this. And now we see a very different opening from usual because Black is really down on development. I feel like it's really difficult for Black to develop this knight on b8 because whenever you try to play, for example, knight d7, there's knight c6, even trapping your queen. Who would have thought that was possible? So yeah, no, I feel like Black is really not having a good time here.
It looks like a very uncomfortable position. At the same time, the engine is just like, there's no problems at all here because Black is up a pawn. So White will still need to take some time if he wants to win the pawn back. But I think so far Vidit is simply focusing on continuing with developing moves. He's ahead in development, so that's why he is not too much in a hurry and he's not worried about being material down. It seems that with the knight on d5, Black has solidified the position because it is guarding the b4 pawn, it is guarding the c7 pawn, and you don't really want to give up the light squared bishop for this knight. That bishop on g2 is way too precious, both for your own king's safety and also for the attack.
Exactly, Anna. And now Vidit goes for the very solid move, queen c2, retreating the queen. Very curious to see what he has in mind. One of the most logical moves will be to play e4 here, but that weakens the pawn on d4 and also shuts down the bishop on g2, which is why Vidit probably does not want to play the move e4, and he will focus more on the development of his pieces. For example, knight e2, it comes in mind, and soon the rooks will follow. But yeah, it's a very interesting position, and despite Black's lack of development, it is not that easy for White to make use of this really quickly.
Yeah, it is not that simple. We are also being told, by the way, that these two have faced each other once in a rapid game on chess.com, no blitz or bullet games, but one rapid game that Vidit has won. So that, of course, always helps if you have a good personal score against your opponent, although a one game difference is not as much as if you have played 20, 30, or 50 games against the same person, as it would be in the case of some of the other matchups, like when Hikaru played against Jospem the other day.
Right. Yeah, they have played a lot of games against each other. So yeah, it's interesting to see the different dynamics. Like there's a couple of players that play against each other so many times, but there are a bunch of players that only have played once or twice against each other. And now we see now the bishop being developed to b7, a very good developing move, and that's where the bishop belongs, especially now that there's no pawn on this diagonal a8 to h1. It makes sense to put the bishop there. And now knight d2, where is the knight going? For now, I think it will stay on d2, but you could potentially move it to e4. You have so many squares available. And I think what Black is trying to do now is going for that move c5.
Yeah, c5 is what rook c8 is preparing. So instead of developing the b8 knight as it would be normal, but Black is keeping that knight where it is because it's guarding the c6 square. You don't want to give up the light square bishop, neither as White nor as Black. So Black is guarding the c6 square with the knight on purpose, not allowing the knight fork, knight c6, not having to give up the bishop for that knight on c6. Now knight b3, White is also trying to at least make it more difficult for Black to push c5, but I'm guessing this would be the moment where, if possible, Black should be pushing that pawn.
Absolutely, yeah. There you go. You got answered right there. That c5 is indeed possible. Very tactical, and I'm curious. So basically, I'm curious to see how it will continue, because if d takes c5, we will see b takes c5. And you probably do not want to take, for the simple reason that there's a lot of tension going on on the c file.
Yeah, that pin should be enough of a reason for White to be discouraged from capturing the pawn. But of course, this has to be calculated. White should calculate it, and Black had to calculate it before pushing c5, that you're not just dropping that pawn on c5.
Right. And yeah, there we go. The capture has been made. So let's see if Vidit is actually going to take. I think he will spend some time on this because it's not easy to make a decision right away. But yeah, I think I think we might, yeah, maybe I think he's gonna ignore it. I think he will ignore the pawn because it's like a permanent weakness.
Yeah, and if you need to, of course, take into account what we mentioned, that pin on the c5, so black can start attacking the c5 knight with rook a5. You have another knight to jump back to d3, but then the b8 knight will also attack your c5 knight, and you can end up losing a piece. So it's not as simple as to just capture the pawn. I wonder. Oh, that's what he has come up with. I was thinking, what are the alternatives for him? And queen to d2, he's stepping out of the pin, but it also means that the c5 pawn is no longer possible to be taken, at least not with the current situation.
Exactly, Anna. And I'm curious to see if Grigory is going for the c4 push anytime soon. Obviously, right now it's not possible because it's simply hanging. But I'm curious to see how he will support his pawn push, because I'm guessing that is what he wants to go for in the next couple of moves. And I think he's starting with f6 to kick the knight from e5. But luckily for white, the c4 square is available for that knight. But it means c5 pawn is in safety.
It does mean that I love the c4 square for the knight, and maybe potential in the future if we could make it to d6. And I think that's why e4 is also a really cool move, because it chases away the well-placed knight of black and is heading toward d6 for white's knight. That will be an octopus knight.
Right. Yeah. Funny that you call it an octopus indeed. But yeah, you're completely right. Knight b6. Grigory obviously wants to trade off the knight. But yeah, queen d6 seems like a fantastic move, offering a queen trade. And after queen takes, knight takes d6, look at the placement of that knight. And indeed, as you mentioned, that's where the knight wants to be. And queen d6 is on the board.
Queen d6, so white offers a queen trade, and after the capture, the knight will be on d6. The contrary would have been knight d6 immediately, but then the queen stay on the board, and after rook d8, it would have been unpleasant to have the knight again in a potential pin. So white is trading the queen, after which there will be no issues at all on the d file.
Indeed. So far, this game seems to be very balanced. Both players are around 5 minutes on the clock, so there's not a big gap in the time of both players, which is very good to see. Typically, like it's pretty common for players to have like differences in time. I mean, it's quite a big time format, 10 minutes on the clock, and you might often see like big time differences, but in this game it's very balanced, and that is very promising for the rest of the game. Now curious to see what black is going to play here.
King f7 is Oparian's answer. Makes sense because it guards the queen, and if you trade on e7, then the king will be guarding the d6 square.
Absolutely. Queen takes e7, king takes e7, and okay, that's actually on the board, and we see the knight surprisingly being traded, but the reason why, Anna, the c5 pawn is hanging.
It is hanging now for real.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that Vidit is going to take that pawn, and yeah, Vidit will be having a very comfortable endgame.
It seems like it is his chance now to take that pawn, unless black can make a miraculous way of winning it back. I don't see any chances. I was thinking of if you double rooks on the a5 to attack the a2 pawn, but even that feels like it's wrong because you allow rook c7 check. So this is perhaps the best chance for Oparian to trade that active rook of white and then try to compensate with piece activity.
Yeah, there was actually one way to attempt to get a pawn back by playing knight a4 here. And the line goes that if you take on c8, bishop takes c8, now you would say that, okay, this pawn is very sad over there, and playing rook b1, that looks ridiculous, right? You don't want to have your rook stuck there on b1, but the move here is rook c1. You're attacking the bishop on c8. The bishop will have to, it will probably go to b7. Looks like a very natural place to be. And you play rook c2, and everything is defended, and your rook will be placed on the open c file. So that seems to be the counter to knight a4, which seems at first to be one of the ways to deal with this position. So now we see rook takes, knight takes, and bishop c6 being played.
So after bishop c6, Vidit is spending quite some time to continue. The reason for that, one of the reasons for that for sure, is that you cannot just activate the a1 rook because the a2 pawn is depending on the defense of the rook. So you want to make sure that you find a way to get that rook into the game, and therefore he must be thinking, is a3 possible, or what are the other ways in which he can deal with the weakness of that pawn to make sure that his rook will get into the game. That's the last piece that he has to develop.
Absolutely. And we got told a really interesting fun fact. So it seems like Vidit has been dominating Rapid lately. In his Rapid games, he has a percentage of 43% winning his games. 40% of them are drawn, and only 16% he has lost. So those are some really amazing stats. And really impressive to have in Rapid.
Definitely, he has been in great shape. And I'm sure that today, too, he is aiming to be in the top 8 to make it to tomorrow's knockout stage. He plays b3. So instead of a3, he plays b3. I wonder what will be the follow-up later. For now, it does fix the b4 pawn, so he does have the chance to attack that pawn later with a move like knight d3, and there isn't an easy way for black to prepare for the defense of that pawn, to be fair.
Indeed, Anna, and that's why Grigory goes for bishop b5, stopping knight d3 from being played, because that was the one of the ways to pick up the pawn on b4, which has been responded with bishop f1, trying to trade off those bishops, and then you'll be happily going knight d3 then. But knight e7 has been played, Anna.
Tactics here, so there's a hanging bishop, there's a hanging knight.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces hanging, and the move here is knight takes e6 because the tension stays here with the bishops, and that's being played actually. So after king takes e6, there's bishop takes b5, and you're just winning that pawn. Now after bishop takes f1, it seems like a very complicated tactic, Anna. I believe, oh, I'm seeing it. There's knight d4.
Oh, with the knight fork on c6, picking up the rook.
Absolutely. And you cannot go back to b5 because I will capture your bishop with my knight. It's covering b5. So that's why this tactic is working. It's insane that Vidit saw this in almost a split second. He's down to 2 minutes on the clock, and he saw this in a flash of a second.
It's true how quickly he noticed it, that there was something wrong with this knight d7 move, and he immediately punishes his opponent. I think this is a moment of realization for Oparin, who's taking quite some time here to try to recover from this, but it's already a second pawn that he's dropping. So 2 pawns down against a grandmaster that has been in peak shape so far in Rapid Chess is not a good recipe, unfortunately, for Oparin.
Wow, and he goes knight d4. It's incredible. Like, it's one thing spotting the tactic, like it's not clear cut. It's very simple to miss. But it's another thing to find it with while you're being on such low time. And he saw it super quickly, and there he goes. He's now up 2 pawns. So something crazy must happen for him not to win this game. But we have to note that the rook is still tied up to this pawn on a2. So that is something that Vidit needs to take care of, and not just that, but also his time. Okay, he has his time is getting closer to that of Grigory, so that counts for something at least.
That does, especially without the increment. So again, of course, we need to highlight and emphasize always that there is no increment in this format. We are also being told, I can't see Anish at the moment on the camera, but why some of the players have spent their time analyzing in between rounds, analyzing sometimes even with their opponents. Anish Giri has brushed his teeth. That is the insider information from our team. Thank you so much. That's a very important detail to know.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate we're not able to show it right now, but indeed, Anishir was brushing his teeth. So yeah, that goes to show how, like, on a personal level, this tournament is. We get to see all the things happening backstage, and that is so beautiful about this tournament. But I believe Vidid that he will convert this game. Let's have a quick look at a different game, Anna. Let me see. Should we go? Let's have a look at how Jospem is doing. Okay, so I see that the player with the black pieces is very low on time here compared to Jospem. We know Jospem is one of the top blitz players on the platform, so that is not surprising at all.
Yeah, and while the position wasn't bad for Black, I think before bishop to c4, it was even showing some advantage for Black. But having not much time against such a speedy player as Jospem, Anna-Maja, you are right that even if it was a bigger advantage for Black, there is not enough time to convert it.
Exactly, Anna. And yeah, the position is a little bit complicated in the sense that it feels like White is doing okay, but I think the biggest problem in White's position is this bishop on h2. It will be able to develop if you try really badly, but the problem is, will you have time for it? Because you will have to play bishop g1, f3, if you even get to play that, because you first need to move your bishop, and then bishop f2, and it's a whole right to get the bishop developed. So I'm not sure how Jospem got to this position that his bishop got stuck on h2, but yeah, he's probably gonna win this game just for the reason that he's up on the clock so much.
Yeah, and that will save him because Black, with only 13 seconds on the clock, cannot win this. As bad and as sad that bishop is on h2, the time situation will win the game for Jospem here.
Absolutely. And yeah, he also seems to be doing well. I mean, both players are doing well in this position, but okay, Black just resigned out of respect because he knows he's going to flag despite him having a much better position. And I mean, the bishop on h2 got free now because Black moved the pawn to f3, but it's still not enough for White to have some sort of comeback. It's just that's how much it matters to have so much time on the clock when there's no increment.
Yeah, and that's a huge difference between the Saturday and the Sunday format. Tomorrow there will be increment. Today there's none, and the top 8 players qualify only to tomorrow's knockout. Let's take a look at this game if it's still on. Oh, wait, what happened?
The game was already finished. I'm sorry, Anna. There's only 2 games left that are still going on, so I figured we move on. But we see that what is going on in this position. We see a queen against a rook and knight and 3 pawns. Both players around 30 seconds, but it looks like Black is checkmating anytime soon.
Yeah, Black is doing amazing. All he needs to avoid is the check. So f5 was in order to block the 5th rank against the queen check, and now Black is ready to strike with knight f3 and then checkmate. Next move, basically, knight f3, g2 was the threat, and after g2, it's a very similar situation.
Indeed, Anna, and you gotta be careful here to not give a stalemate, as in you place your pieces in such way. No, as I was saying, it just happened.
Anna, you jinxed it this time. It wasn't me this time. It was you. We are so good at this.
We are a great team, Anna. I have to admit it. I was just about to say you do not want to allow the stalemate. You will put your pieces in such a way the king has nowhere to move, and then the queen is free to go wherever. Just like White will be like, please take my queen, and we go for the draw.
Yeah, and that was Nodirbek Abdusattorov, the reigning world rapid chess champion, with the black pieces stalemating instead of winning. To be fair with him, he only had 11 seconds left on the clock, so not easy with that increment, but that is a missed chance for him to get the full point.
Indeed, Anna, and the round has finished. We saw some very exciting games, and we're now waiting for round 3 to start. We see that at the top, there is Jan Nepomniachtchi leading with 2 points, and right behind, also with 2 points, there's Jospem And it seems like a lot of players have already either drawn one game or lost the game, or maybe drawn two games. So that goes to show, like, obviously you want to win all of your games to win. But if you have lost half a point so far already in 2 rounds, it's not a big deal. You still have a big chance to qualify for the finals.
Very true that this is an early stage, but great to see how we still have 2 players on 100% score. It's not easy to score 100% in a field like this. And we are already straight into round 3. There is no time to even pause here when the action is on the way. Alexander Grishuk with the white pieces against Promin. If we could be told about that username. I don't recognize the profile picture in that tiny. I don't know, Anna-Maya, if you can recall the username of Black.
Me neither, but I believe the country is Hungary, if I am correct. But by the looking at the
see
flag.
The flag. Because my screen is tiny, so I'm like, I don't know what country is that. Oh, that's where I'm from. Okay, all right.
I believe it's Hungary. It says Hungary. I can confirm.
Grandmaster Benjamin Gledora, of course. My former teammate Benji here with the black pieces.
It's a familiar name for you.
Very familiar name. I have been to many events together with Benjamin when I still competed on the Olympic team of Hungary, and he was one of the upcoming rising stars. He still is, of course, a rising star, but no longer a kid when I met him.
Yeah, I'm not really sure like what year they're born, but it seems like 1999. So it seems like they are pretty young.
Very young still, indeed. And Benjamin is castling on that flank where the pawns have been pushed. This is usually a sign of knowing theory very well, because you don't do this without knowing theory.
Yeah, it's actually incredible. So the setup that he goes for is the semi-Slav, but with the bishop on g7 and the pawns pushed on the king side and short castle, which is really rare to see, especially with the H trial open, because typically whenever that happens, I mean, obviously you have you want to take on g3 and allow h takes g3 to happen once white has short castled, but now that white wasn't short castled yet, they have the choice to go long castle or stay in the center, but they chose to go long castle, and now this rook on the h file is just looking right towards the black king.
Mm-hmm. It does look menacing, and if it wasn't for the queen on d8, you could take that pawn on g5, because after h takes g5, queen h7 would be checkmate. Now this is not possible because the queen can take on g5 too, so we shouldn't get overexcited about the h5, but just saying that there is some danger, and the queen has to stay on that diagonal for black.
Absolutely, Anna. And now king b1 has played a very prophylactical move. And yeah, I'm really curious to see how both players are dealing with this position, because it's quite an unusual position, and he just goes for g4 like there's nothing going on.
Yeah, Grishuk is somewhat puzzled by this, or simply just very focused. I can't quite tell. It's either or in this situation with his body language and facial expressions. But after g4, maybe he's still trying to recall theory, because some of these lines are so theoretical that this, even though it looks like it's madness, is still very well analyzed.
Indeed. Yeah, it's really hard to tell if he, like, what his thoughts are about this position. But looking at the time situation, I've seen players play much faster in the opening, so it seems like a little bit of a new territory for both players in some way. But yeah, Grishuk is spending his time now. Where do you want to go with the knight? You want to go to h2 to attack the pawn on g4. h4 seems the more natural approach, but the problem is your knight will be stuck there for almost forever. I will not allow you to, with the black piece, I will not allow you to move the knight anytime soon. And he goes for knight g1. He wants to, where do you see one to go, Anna? What do you think?
I think it was the process of elimination. You started mentioning, Anna-Maya, the alternatives, and as active as it seems to go toward h4, there is no follow-up. That knight was going to be stuck and blocking the file where the rook wants to be active. So even though this is slow, Grishuk is preparing to remaneuver, to regroup his pieces by going toward e2 and f4 with that knight. For now, he takes on d5 because after knight e2, the pawn on c4 would have been hanging. So I think he just wanted to sort out that issue with the pawns.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, it's so we see bishop d3. I have yet to see like what black is going for here, because obviously you want to try to attack on the queen side now that the king is on the queen side over here. But it's a little bit difficult to see how it's going to happen, as after well, first of all, b5 is not happening because both the knight and the bishop are defending that square. And yeah, something slow as a6 b5, it might be a little bit too slow, and I feel like white has a really like simple approach to the position, but he goes for b5 anyways. He's proving me wrong here.
I was gonna ask Anna-Maya, because when you mentioned they can't play it, I was like, but what if he wants to sacrifice it? Of course, it takes a lot of courage to do it, but he might just say that b5 will serve him very well for the attack. So he's giving up that b pawn on purpose. He's challenging Grishuk to go for it. And if he takes that pawn, it will be black who starts the attack against white's king sooner. So let's see how he will execute this. Will he chase that knight away first, or queen a5 also puts pressure on the knight, of course. Now black could take twice and get two minor pieces.
Right. Queen a5 has been played. So yeah, the knight probably needs to retreat. And yeah, the Benjamin is just not afraid to sacrifice a pawn. And I mean, seeing his play, I can actually imagine that he doesn't mind losing the pawn, because he is like, I mean, the pawns on the king side there. He does not care that the king is so exposed, but at the same time, this bishop on g7 is doing fantastic job defending the king, and it's often underestimated how powerful this bishop can be for the king. And not only is it defending the king, but also the pawn h6 that really needs that defense. So yeah, I'm curious to see how he will proceed now with the attack.
Yeah, it might sound crazy, but I was looking at moves like knight c5, whether you can just claim that by taking that knight, the open diagonal, taking on c3 will lead to a really big attack for black. It might not make sense because knight c5 is not that threatening, but certainly there's potential in this position.
Absolutely, Anna. I think knight c5 is indeed a fantastic move, and it's one of the most active moves in this position. It doesn't do that much. Like, I think you want to look for more forcing moves, but yeah, knight c5 looks one of the best moves in the position, because you just don't have much more in this position. And I think yeah, I think the attack will just happen a bit slowly, as black is a little bit underdeveloped, but so is white. I mean, the knight on g1 is still I mean, it tried to develop, but it was pushed back.
Yeah, let's see what Benjamin will come up with. And in the meantime, we can see in the standings, by the way, that Nepomniachtchi and Jostam have drawn their game. So they were the only two players on a perfect score. And now after a draw, it means not a single player has 3 out of 3. It's a very difficult task always to qualify from the Saturday Swiss to Sunday's event. For instance, now in this moment, Benjamin would be missing out because of a worse tiebreak score. Of course, it's an early stage of the tournament, but there will be many players, potentially many players on similar points, and half a point can make a whole lot of a difference.
Indeed, Anna, and we have been told that Grishuk has one rapid game lost against Benjamin and one blitz win. So they have some experience playing against each other, but they played against so many players. I think they will not remember those games very well. But it's always great to see those stats and hear about them. And we see knight c5 actually being played.
And Grishuk is surprised that the move that was suggested by a much lower rated player here on the broadcast has been played.
Amazing job, Anna. Yes, knight c5 has been played, and yeah, it's just very convincing indeed. Knight c5 what is the follow-up here for white? I mean, I'm curious to see if Alexander Grishuk actually expected this, or is he just starstruck? Like, what is this even a move?
Yeah, it looked like he was definitely surprised, but I would read it maybe more like he just doesn't think it's that strong. At the same time, he didn't do anything but develop his knight, which allows either the capture of the bishop, so knight takes b3 to get rid of that strong light squared bishop, or is there any follow-up? Maybe that's the best choice. I'm not sure what else can black do now that the knight is guarding the c3 knight, so d takes c5 was a threat.
Absolutely, yeah. So now black has a pair of bishops, and you would say that that's really vital, but at the same time, the two knights could be really dangerous in the position, and this bishop on g7 is not that great. It's pretty much used as a defensive resource in this position. So I feel like both players still have like a lot of attacking chances, but I've yet to see like where Grishik is going with the pieces. I would assume that one of the moves that he would consider is knight f4 and knight h5. But the problem I think with that is that you're letting go of the knight on c3, which might get a lot of pressure. There you go, rook c8.
Yeah, and not allowing knight f4. You're right, Anna-Maya. Rook c8 is a very strong move. And that was the last piece for black to bring into the attack. So we can see the two rooks, the bishop's doing a great job too, and the queen, black's pieces are more active. So it is I think compensating enough for the sacrifice pawn for sure, that the semi-open b file.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of things that, I mean, maybe, you know what would be interesting if the bishop on g7 could be maneuvered all the way to b4. You will let go of the pawn on h6, but even if you lose that pawn, I think Benjamin wouldn't even mind that. You can safely hide with your king all the way on e7, and because white is so stuck with the pieces, I'm not expecting white to be able to start an attack anytime soon here, unless something really changes in the next couple of moves.
Yeah, very true that white so far seems to be on the defensive and has to be guarding the queen side, especially the c3 knight with that pin. The b and c files are the crucial files here in black's attack. But it's also not easy to continue making progress in a way. Although immediate threats there are because of the pins. So if it was black to move, bishop takes e2 eliminates one of the knights. You can't take back with the knight because you are playing the both as gambit. So if you take with the rook, then the knight on c3 is hanging because of the b5 pin. So that is an immediate threat that white has to deal with.
Exactly, Anna. And I'm curious to see how Grishik is going to deal with this, as he's spending quite some time on his move right now. I would say maybe it's a good idea to offer a queen trade. Okay, he goes rook c1. I was going to suggest queen a4 for the simple reason that I just want to get the queens off the board. Make sure that my king is safe. But yeah, he goes for the more defensive move, rook c1, which makes a lot of sense, strengthening the c file a bit more.
Makes sense indeed. And queen a4 now. So he is listening to you, Anna-Maya, hopefully not actually listening to you, but playing the same idea, queen a4.
Yeah, I hope he's not listening indeed. But as I said that he played queen a4 and now queen b6. So obviously Benjamin is avoiding the queen trade. And now Grishik goes back to d1 with the queen. Very surprising move. But I'm actually sensing that he's going for that pawn on g4. The pawn g4 has been advanced a lot and has no defender. So I'm guessing that the next move he's thinking about is simply knight f4. And he could actually create some dangerous plays here on the king side.
Yeah, it looks scary if it's white to move and black doesn't preemptively defend or prepare to defend that g4 pawn, because after knight f4, you are right, it's hanging and you cannot push the h pawn because of the knight on f4. Only the f pawn, f5 would guard the g4 pawn, but it feels very loose around the black king.
Yeah, the more you push those pawns, the more space you create for white to attack here, because the king will be extremely exposed, as you said. And it is quite simple for white to break through with moves like f3. Now we see bishop c4 being played. I'm guessing, I mean, obviously you're just putting a lot of more pressure on white's position. but I'm not seeing a direct threat just yet. So now knight a4 has been played. Okay, they're speeding up quite a bit, Anna. We're moving to the lower, less time control.
Yeah, and there's no increment, so of course they have to speed up. This is already a blitz territory. F5 has been pushed. Our evaluation bar is criticizing it somewhat, but it's such a complex position. A pair of knights against a pair of bishops. White has managed to move the knights to shift them to a4 and c3. They were on c3 and e2, and at the two move together, they go in chunks as a group. But there's no real follow-up from there, so it's more for a defensive purpose to guard the queen's side and guard the white king first and foremost.
Absolutely. And as we see, Benjamin is hopefully not listening either to the broadcast, because he has actually played the maneuver that I was suggesting, bishop f8, bishop b4. And now the bishop is also participating in the attack. And now it may look like it's very scary for white over here, since there's a lot of tension going on the queen side. But look at what's happening on the king side. f3 has been played, putting pressure on that pawn g4.
Yeah, f3, and the black just says, you know what, I can guard a pawn with the h pawn. There are no pawns right next to the black king. It's very airy there, but luckily for black, white is very busy on the queen side. So even though the black king is really alone, left without even the pawn chain that would normally be defending it right in front, there is no time. Bishop takes a2. Is that working?
Wow, bishop takes a2. So the problem is that after knight takes a2, obviously the rook is hanging, and after king takes, bishop takes c3.
And Grishuk feels like he is believing that he made a mistake. The evaluation bar still shows that there is a way for him to keep the game going, potentially because of this queen h5 threatening the perpetual check. So I think he's going for it because he has to. There isn't a way for white to continue the game other than getting a draw, forcing a draw.
Indeed, yeah. Black has such a crushing attack. There is no other thing for white to resort to. He has to go for this draw, and queen takes h5. I'm curious to see what Benjamin is going to respond to this, because on one hand, you can say he can try to run away from this, but I think that will hurt him chances even more, especially right now with the bishop on a2. Bishop b3 has been played.
Oh, and it seems to be a blunder, allowing
rook h1.
white to bring the rook in, so white doesn't have to go for the checks just yet. He can go for checkmate.
Yeah, with the rook now involved in the attack, it's much more difficult for black to escape. As I mentioned, you can try to go escape in this position, but with bishop b3, you're not in time. You don't have any forcing moves anymore. Now it's white leading with the forcing moves, queen h check, and it's actually made in a couple of moves.
Benjamin must have missed that white could still bring one more piece into the attack with rook h1, bishop b3. As you mentioned, Anna Maya, it was way too slow, and now it is black who will get checkmated. What a game this has been. Fireworks on the board, mainly black sacrificing the pawn and then the piece, but Alexander Grishuk managed to keep his cool and ends up checkmating the black king.
Absolutely, Anna, just to show you and the people watching us in the chat where the checkmate is, because it seems like the king is simply escaping by going to e7. But the problem is that after king e7, rook h7, you give a check here, you're forced to go to d6, then queen e5 check, and after king c6, there is queen takes e6, and now you might feel like, I have this move bishop d6, but guess what? The move queen d7 is checkmate.
Yeah, it's beautiful how the knight on a4, which was mainly for defensive purposes, is actually a key attacking piece here, not allowing the king to go to b6.
Yeah, and the pattern is so beautiful, and it makes only more sense seeing the checkmate that that was what Benjamin missed. And what a beautiful game we saw. And it is kind of sad to see Benjamin going down in such a way, because he had such a crushing attack. He was proving us that it's okay to play for some risky lines here. But in the end, he was not able to keep the attack going, and Grishuk made perfect use of this.
Anna Maya, if you can just show one more time that moment, because it happened quick, the bishop b3 move, and what would have been the better move for black, because Grishik was shaking his head, just simply acknowledging that white will have to go for the draw, the perpetual check. So if black had played more accurately, what would have been the line?
So apparently there is two ways that you can, still like survive this game, but it's definitely not easy to spot. One of the moves is King G7.
Sure.
I believe, yes, exactly that. I believe one of the reasons is that after a move like that was played in game Rook H1, you would simply play Rook H8 and you have some support in the position, but it's very difficult to make such a move. Just moving your king right towards the queen that's already so close to you. Another move was Rook takes C3. Now, I mean, it's one thing to actually spot this move because there's literally three pieces looking right at that square. They were defending the knight very well. Obviously, if you take with the knight, you'll get a lot of problems. I believe there is bishop c4 check followed by bishop d3. Let me put that on the board very quickly. Bishop c4, king b1, and bishop d3 is a problem. Oh, apparently that's not the problem. One
like
of the problems.
Also, is it wait,
bishop takes c3
first?
Right. Yeah, and there's many problems here for white. That is definitely clear. And after, okay, so rook takes c3. Let me pull that up again. Yeah, rook takes c3. Yeah, you don't want to play b takes c3. That already feels really bad because the knight is hanging. There's a lot of problems here. Maybe even bishop b3. You're not even gonna give the a bishop away, and it is simply crushing there. But the move goes, the line goes rook takes c3, and the beautiful move bishop b3. So that is insane. It's a crazy line. I really don't blame Benjamin for not seeing this, but it goes really, really deep. And basically now white is forced to go for the perpetual by giving checks along this, the sixth rank.
Yeah, what a crazy move. Rook takes c3, and because of the exchange sacrifice, the rook cannot go to h1. That was the key difference, but was very hard to see, especially with only 2 minutes on the clock. I'm being told that there's still a game potentially that's on, a rook game where either of the players, or at least one of them, tries to win on time.
I was about to switch, Anna, and just as I wanted to switch, it disappeared because the game finished.
Yeah. What was the result? Do we know? If anyone could let us know, what was the king and rook versus king and rook endgame, or was there at least a pawn or two on the board? I was just told that they were playing for time.
So seeing how Liam was on 1.5 out of 2, I believe he lost because he has still 1.5 points.
Oh.
So I'm guessing there was a flag and Amin won.
He potentially lost on time, indeed. This is already round 4, and we can see that with that win, the game we have just analyzed, Alexander Grishuk is among the leaders. It's 2.5 points for Janja Pameshi, also Jose Martinez, Jospem, and Alexander Grishuk. All three of them on 2.5 points. And Pameshi versus Grishuk is our pairing for round 4.
Yeah, what amazing pairing. And they're actually playing one of our favorite openings, Anna. Do you want to share it with the audience what it is?
Oh, of course. We should just quickly play through the entire sequence of the French defense, which is the best opening in the world, obviously not biased here. And this is the Tarrasch variation. There's lots of exciting lines you can play, some of them with isolated pawn, others are more of a solid structure like this one, where we have 2 knights, one on d4, one on d5. It looks like a very solid approach. And I'm wondering, does it mean they might not want to play against each other? Will we see a game is the question when we see teammates facing each other, teammates and friends.
Yeah, I'm curious to see as well. It looks like they're playing on and making an exciting battle happen. I see. Okay, we see Bishop B7 now being played, Queen E2, and yeah, they're developing. They're playing calm moves. Yeah, I think they're gonna play on. Because I mean, obviously, there's a lot at stake, and they've already lost a 0.5 point so far.
True. It's an early stage of the tournament. At the end, in the last few rounds, it's more likely to see strategic draws, not just against players that are teammates or friends, but also for when you have a mathematically proven qualification, you usually go for the secure draw to make sure that you qualify to Sunday's knockout. But as you mentioned, Anna Maya, after 3 rounds, there's still plenty of room for play, and either player with any result could still qualify, which is true that even with a loss, there will be still plenty of room to make up for it.
Absolutely. And what surprises me so far is that Grishuk is already down to 7 minutes and 45 seconds. Jan has barely spent the time on his clock. And we saw in the previous game that Grishuk was playing around the same kind of time management as his opponent had. But in this game, he's taking it very easy. And Jan is just up on time already, and by quite a bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say that this would be the trademark Nepomniachtchi versus the trademark Grishuk, right? We often see Grishuk in time troubles. In classical chess too, he would run really low on time, and Nepomniachtchi the opposite. He's a speed monster. Even in classical chess, he's gaining time, not spending time. But obviously Grishuk is aware that without increment, you cannot just start thinking as much as he would normally do in rapid or even classical games. So he has to hurry up. You're right, with this 1.5 minute difference, it's a massive difference with no increment at all.
Yeah, and as the position develops, it gets more and more complicated, and this time will become really valuable. So now we see bishop f4, and it seems like White evaluated properly that there's a lot of weaknesses along this diagonal, which is why I feel like he's going for bishop f4, and he might set up something with knight b5, trying to move his way to either c7 or d6. And I feel like he is doing a great job improving the position of his pieces, whereas Black, I mean, obviously Black has a fantastic bishop on b7, but the pieces feel a little bit stuck together on over here with the knight on d7, knight on f6.
I agree with you. So it's definitely more comfortable to play it from White's perspective, position-wise and time-wise. So there's quite some pressure on Grishuk, even if the evaluation bar shows a roughly equal position or just slightly better for White. I think in practice, it is a really good chance for Nepomniachtchi to score a full point from how the tendency of this game is more time and more comfortable position for White.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we know in the French defense we often get made fun of this light squared bishop over here, and now it's developed really well. So you would say that would make a change over here, but the simple problem is that the pieces are just so stuck together, especially the knights. Like you might want to move the knight to d5 over here, but I feel like since there's moves like bishop g5, and you might even want to stay on this diagonal for the simple reason that there's a lot of squares accessible for you on this diagonal, and it kind of messes with Black's position still. So yeah, for that reason, I would prefer taking the white pieces in this position. I feel like there is a lot more possibilities than for Black.
Yeah, I agree with you fully. And as we discussed the options, Grishuk is now down to 5 minutes versus 9 minutes. Not a good sign when it comes to holding this position against the World Championship challenger, Jan Nepomniachtchi, who is just casually sitting there. We met his dog just moments ago. I hope that there will be more appearances by the lovely pet that was accompanying Jan earlier in the day.
Yeah, indeed, Anna. And as you were mentioning that we see Queen C8 being played, a very passive move, I have to say. I'm curious to see what his plan is. I think he's going for a move like Rook D8 to develop the Rook and potentially trade some pieces along the D file, because the more the pieces you trade off here with the black pieces, the more space you get. So that will be ideal for Grishuk. And he goes A6.
It feels slow. It certainly feels slow. It stops all the piece action that could go to b5, knight b5 first and foremost, but it feels very slow, and the bar agrees with our intuition about this, Anna Maya, that this cannot be right.
It doesn't feel right. It feels way too slow. And apparently there is a very big tactical blow over here. The move here, knight takes e6, jumps on our minds as after f takes e6, there's bishop takes e6, and suddenly there's a lot of problems here for black, because as I mentioned, the pieces are a bit tangled together, and it makes it a little bit difficult for black to find something here. As after king h8, it may seem like black is holding things together, but there's b4, and suddenly this bishop has trouble finding the right place, as the only safe place it looks like it has is bishop e7. But after bishop e7, there's more problems, because there's bishop takes, oh, I can't, oh, I thought I couldn't make the move, it didn't register. Knight takes e7, and then queen takes e7. And okay, you might be like, okay, there's a bishop hanging here, but so is your knight on d7. And the position is just falling apart of black. So in that line, white is simply winning, but Jan didn't see that. Jan missed it and plays bishop b3.
Oh, has he already chosen his move? Because I was like, is he still thinking in that moment? No, you're right. That moment was missed, and rook e8 guards the e6 square, so there's no longer an option of sacrificing there.
Indeed, yeah, rook 8 has been played, and it seems like Grishuk will be able to recover from this. He plays another slow move, h6. Now, we have to admit here that there are not a lot of moves left for Grishuk. You just want to sit back and wait, see what your opponent does, and then like respond to that. But as we see h6 being played, we also see h3 being played. So we don't see much progress being made so far. Both players are taking it very easy.
Bishop to c2, I like it. There's a potential queen bishop battery on the b1 h7 file. At the same time, it has given Blake the chance to start regrouping his pieces, and hopefully for Grishuk to simplify, because he badly needs a few trades of pieces, but of course it cannot be any piece trade. It has to be always the right pieces. The most active pieces of white is ideally what you want to trade when you are in a defensive position.
Absolutely, and we see queen d7 being played. Now you see Grishuk is slowly coming back from this position where his pieces were a little stuck together. Now we see queen b7 putting pressure on that pawn on g2. So now there's an actual threat in the position, and it's not so simple for Jan to defend this, because after f3, you will not have a great position, for the simple reason that the pieces will have difficulties playing together. And you do not want to play f3 in such position. It weakens a lot of squares around your king.
Yeah, I agree with you that is a hard move to make. So Jan goes for the queen to d3, setting up that queen bishop battery. It's not a threat of checkmate yet, because the knight on f6 is guarding h7, and the king too would have a square to go to, f8 and potentially e7 too. But it starts looking scary for both kings in a way.
Indeed, Anna. And we have been shared, it has been shared with us that both players, obviously they have played a lot of games over the board and in online chess, but we know from our chess.com stats when it comes to Blitz, they haven't played many games in Rapid, but on Blitz, they have quite an even score. Surprisingly enough, there's a 33% score of Nepo winning against Grishuk. 25 games won, 24 games were drawn, and 27 were a win for Grishuk. So it's quite close between the two players.
Very true that it's an even battle, and it seems to be an even battle now on the board too. Earlier, it felt like Nepomniachtchi certainly had the upper hand. But now the upper hand is still there in terms of time management, but the position is getting chaotic. What's happening now? That knight was heading toward f4 to take the queen, and also the g2 pawn. Queen e2 was the choice of Nepomniachtchi. How does this prevent knight f4? He simply wants to go to g4?
Yeah, he simply wants to go to g4, and I think he has to allow the capture on g2 to happen. But I'm thinking that he has some counterplay here, and especially since f3 is always in the air. But now with knight takes g2, I'm guessing that you can just trap this knight by playing bishop g3. So yeah, I think that's why he's like, okay, you can take my pawn. It's gonna be lost anyways. He cares more about improving his position and instead attacking on black's king rather than playing a simple and slow move like f3, because it will pretty much shut your attack down, because your queen
sorry, Adam, I didn't mean to interrupt, but simple, so slow moves. G5 on the board. What's going on?
g5. Yeah, surprisingly enough, the engine is happy with it. It's saying it's a slight advantage for white, but it seems to be one of the best moves here for black, because bishop g3 now. I'm guessing that you have to take this pawn eventually, and yeah, you'll be able. Oh, it's getting really complicated, Anna. As after f3, what is happening? Because if you retreat, you lose the knight again.
Yeah,
it is really messy.
That's gotta be the point. That has to be the point of white. That with the pawn on g5 and the queen on g4, there's a pin, of course, on the g5, but apparently f3 loses. So what is
the rook is hanging
on?
Oh
my, Anna, we are blind. Excuse us. We need a break. I feel like there's gotta be a break after this round because we are missing a hanging rook. That is why you should not play f3.
Okay, Anna, I have to be honest here. We're not the, Jan is saying, okay, the commentators missed the hanging rook. Let me give the rook right here. There you go, rook e4. But he has a better purpose.
Indeed, and after bishop takes e4, when white takes back on e4 with the bishop, look at the diagonal. The queen is attacked, the knight is attacked, the rook is attacked. Everything is on that diagonal.
Everything is hanging. So he found a better way to sacrifice the rook and still make us feel like we're not the only one missing a rook. And he plays, Grishuk plays f6 here, and the position is so chaotic. And look at the time situation. Grishuk has only 1 minute left on the clock. Will that be enough to survive this game? I'm not sure if he's able to recover, even if the position is equal, even winning for him, if he can finish off the game, because obviously Jan is going for that flag.
Yeah, it's just way too big of a time difference. The position is so rich, so complex. There's tactical patterns for both players, but unfortunately, it will come down to the massive time difference. And as you mentioned, even if Grishuk manages to get a decisive advantage from this chaos on the board, he will most likely not have enough time to convert it.
Indeed, Anna. And now the funny thing is that it may look like, okay, now this rook is pinned. You're going to lose this rook no matter what. But the funny thing is, once again, the queen and the bishop are, queen and the rook, I mean, on this diagonal are so lined up so well for this bishop. So whenever you take on e4, I just take back and we're doing fine. Which is why Grishuk is going for knight d7, putting pressure on that knight, and knight f3. What a move.
Yeah, this is a crazy game, and the rook is still hanging, but no one wants to take it. So now knight takes e5, and Jan is thinking, what are the options other than knight takes
rook takes e5 was just fine, but I believe Jan was worried for rook f8, and okay, they're speeding up now, which is very logical because Grishuk is very low on time, and. Yeah. Once, okay, he goes f3 just to stop this pin on this diagonal. Now he is hiding the rook over there, but now the problem is, okay, so there was a small improvement here. Rook e2 is still fine. But there was queen h5, putting more pressure on the king, not caring about the rook hanging, because there's so much going on the king side, with the rook also entering on the 7th rank. But rook e2 is still okay as Grishuk goes for queen g7, bishop e4 now. And it's getting so unclear, Anna. There's a lot of things going on. White should be winning here, but it is not so simple as it may feel like, as it may sound like.
Yes, because so many pieces are tangled up and hanging. What clearly we can highlight again, of course, is the Alexander Grishuk is running out of time and there is no increment. He's down to his final 35 seconds and he knows that the position is collapsing and the time is also about to run out.
Indeed, and now we see, okay, the bishop's being traded off, and okay, we see the minor pieces being taken away from the board, but now Jan is simply taking the pawns on the queen side and converting the game in a very simple but fashionable way.
He is converting indeed, still keeping a 2-minute time advantage on the clock. But as we mentioned, now the position 2 is winning for white. So Grishuk, even though he, of course, gets into time trouble very often, it's his trademark, but he cannot make up for such a big time difference and also the lack of pawns. So the 3-time World Blitz Chess champion is going to go down in this game against Jan Nepomniachtchi. And that will mean that Nepomniachtchi will have 3.5 points. Will there be anyone on 3.5? So far, it seems that no one can catch Nepomniachtchi.
Indeed, and there's obviously still a lot of rounds to play, but so far Jan is doing a fantastic job. And obviously, as we mentioned before, since it's a Swiss format, you would say like, okay, you lose a round, you'll come back the next round. It's not that easy. In this format, everyone is extremely strong. It's a very high level tournament. So every single round is another challenge. The same as it was in the previous round. So here we see resignation. Let's quickly jump, Anna, to a different game. What an interesting pawn end game.
Yeah, and thanks to the other pawn, sometimes you can just waste a tempo when you need to. So it's not stalemate in this moment. If it wasn't for the other F pawn, King F6 would have been stalemate, but by pushing F5, you pass the turn to black, and after King G7, King E7, the pawn simply promotes. Very instructive endgame that gives a point to David Paravian here with the white pieces.
Indeed, Anna. Let's move on to another game because there's still 2 games being played, and we have a rook versus rook situation where the pawn on d4 is dropping. Are they gonna play it out? Yeah, I think they are gonna play it out because Bortnik has 6 seconds. How is he gonna be able to make 50 moves in this time situation?
He is also known, obviously, for his very speedy skills, but you cannot make up for a full minute of a time difference, even with the best of pre-move skills. So black will never trade the rook. The only way you could say this is white if black blunders the rook, because black is not willing to trade it. You might blunder it, and then if you end up losing on the happened the other way around.
Yeah, I think it was either a desperate attempt knowing he's going to flag, or he didn't expect he expected the rook to move from this file, so he thought he was going to be safe. But I think it was a desperate attempt because he knows he's going to get flagged. So it's his final attempt to save the game. We see one more game in such a difficult position. Okay, so white was clearly winning here. It's probably checkmate very soon. Yeah, okay, we see that after the king moves, there's for example king h8, there's back rank checkmate, and on actually king f8 there's rook f7.
So the king could still go to g7, but I guess after king h8, queen d4, and there is no defense, you cannot block. So if after in this position king h8, we can just take on d4.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, correct. Yeah, it's a very winning position for white. So black flagged here, lost on time, but it was a very lost position anyway. So that concludes round 4, Anna.
And that means that we deserve a short break, but don't go anywhere because the action is just heating up. There's still plenty of rounds to go, and there's so much fight for those top 8 places, which will be the qualification for tomorrow's knockout. So we're going to take a very short break. But when we are back, round 5 returns of the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Be right back.
The community's going to love this. This is going to be the best video series we've ever done. So let's get him on the books for next week. Look at that. Fide's calling me. Probably checking in stuff. Hey, Fide, what's up? No, I know. It was a great time last night. Thanks for helping me get home. Yeah, no, bright and early recording some stuff with Vishy already. So what's up? Yeah, no, I know. We're excited about it too. You don't like us using chess.com World Championship. It's totally fine. I mean, there's a lot of words we could use for world. There's Galactic, the chess.com Galactic Chess Championship. Earth. There's Universe, Global, Chess.Cosmos Championship, yo. I love that. We could even go with multiverse these days, just ask Doctor Strange. Apparently that's a thing. I think Chess.com Global Championship will be what we do, and that sounds great. All that matters, it's a great event for top players, a great event for the community, first of its kind, and we're pumped, and I really appreciate it, and let's go team. All right, bye. Okay, well, there you go. You just heard that. That was fun. I mean, honestly, it gives us a chance to do the fun video again. Let me just turn off the lights, and we'll just do this thing. Let's go. In a globe where only one can be the world Hess champion, now anyone can become a Chess.com global champion. Chess.com announces the Chess.com Global Championship. With $1 million in prizes. With the globe's best chess players.
What? He mouse slips! He mouse slips!
Against Robert Hess's will, now anyone will become a Chess.com Global Champ. Hey everyone, that's right. We actually are launching the first ever Chess.com Global Championship. With $1 million in prizes, anyone can play, anyone can win, and everyone will have a chance to take home their part in this $1 million cash prize event, because regular prizes will be available even for non-title players. So how do you sign up and how do you play? First, you go to chess.com/verified and complete the application process. Second, you just throw down on the chessboard and play with your fellow Chess.com verified members. Dozens of open qualifier events will qualify hundreds of players into the play-in round. After that, 32 victors of the play-in stage will be joined by 32 of the world's best invited for a 64-player epic knockout tournament. The final 8 players will head to Toronto, Canada for a live final where only one will be crowned the first ever Chess.com Global Champion. So what are you waiting for? Get ready, get verified, and join us in this first ever Chess.com Global Championship.
Welcome back, everyone, to the broadcast of the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. This is already round 5 that is about to start, and we see that the sole leader of the event after 4 rounds is Jan Nepomniachtchi on 3.5 points. Lots of players on 3 and 2.5 points right behind to fight for the top 8 places, which is what matters today, the qualification to tomorrow's knockout stage. The top 8 will qualify.
Indeed, Anna, we saw some very exciting games. The games are about to resume, and we saw some fireworks today, Anna. We saw some flags here. We saw some crazy tactics going on. The players are very sharp today, and the game has started.
Not a bad matchup that we have to cover for you guys for round 5. Jan Nepomniachtchi against Hikaru Nakamura. Can Hikaru take the first spot from Nepomniachtchi is the question. Of course, it's not that easy, especially not with the black pieces, but I'm sure that Hikaru is very motivated to do so.
Indeed, and let's have a look. We see that, okay, the game started as an Italian game, so it's a very a slow-paced game. We see that the knights are placed on f6 and g6. They could potentially go to h5 and then followed by knight f4. Either of the knights can go to f4, and there will be some pressure on the king side, but we see a lot of action on the queen side. What is going on the queen side?
So Hikaru has sacrificed a pawn by not taking back on a6. I think he still knows what he's doing, because you normally don't just give up that pawn. The idea of black is to keep the pawn structure healthy and later pick up the pawn with a maneuver like rook to a8, rook takes a6.
Absolutely, and it seems like black has a really nice setup. The pawn structure is very healthy, whereas white's pawn structure, even though you were able to take a pawn, you're probably going to lose that pawn very soon. And also you have a lot of problems to fix here with your pawns. A lot of the pawns are a bit weakened, and that's why a5 was actually played to fix one of those problems. And Hikaru did not take that pawn, actually.
He's not taking the pawn just yet, and he also has to take care of his b5 pawn. So this is about winning back the a pawn, but also making sure that he's not dropping another pawn in the meantime. Let's see how he will deal with everything. Is this our current position, Anna-Maja? Rook a8?
Yes, this is the current position. Rook a8 attacking the pawn on a6, and now there is a lot of tension on the pawn on b5, but it's a little bit difficult for white to deal with this, since after, imagine if it's, okay, let's assume we're gonna take on b5 with the knight and then rook takes a6. It's gonna be very difficult to defend the pawn on a5, because obviously you want to put your rook on the a file, but your rook is tied down defending that pawn on b5. So let me show it to the audience over here. Rook takes a6, and it's not so easy to defend this pawn on a5. You could potentially play queen a2 or queen a4, but you do not want to go down this hill, as you will face rook e2 a8. So it's definitely a very difficult position for white here. They will probably need to sacrifice this pawn to regain some counterplay, but it's not that simple. And actually, we're actually seeing that this is happening in the game. Knight takes b5, rook takes a6, and now c4, sacrificing the pawn on a5.
Yeah, so Hikaru's reaction, we might have his reaction, to be fair, with a bit of delay, as he's streaming and we are grabbing his camera from his stream. But still, that was hilarious to see. The pawns are gone from the A and B5s, and now there's a potential trade of dark squared bishops. Not even potential, because you don't have where to go. You need to trade either on e3 or allow white taking the bishop. I wonder what's gonna come after the trade. c6 immediately by Hikaru to make sure that you can undermine white's central structure and also get a bit to that c4 pawn. So for white, the weaknesses are on e4 and c4, and for black, it's the backward d6 pawn.
Indeed, Anna, you're absolutely right about that. And that's why Hikaru goes for rook d8, defending the pawn on d6. Now, you would want to put more pressure on this pawn on d6 with the move rook d3, but then your e4 pawn will sadly be taken. So that's why obviously Jan is not considering this, and he goes G3, a very solid and safe move. Also making sure there's no knight f4 in the position, which was one of the ideas I mentioned earlier, and that's why Hikaru is deciding to go somewhere else with the knight.
Yeah, and that somewhere else seems promising to maneuver it toward e6. From e6, it could potentially jump to c5, or if at any point the d4 square becomes available, that would be, of course, a dream knight spot, an outpost for Black's knight. At the moment, this is a very, as we would call it, dynamic imbalance, or actually balance. The imbalances balance out each other. So the d6 backward pawn is compensated because white also has his own weaknesses, as we mentioned, the c4 and e4 pawns that you need to be holding on to. Now white is doubling down on the d5 to win the d6 pawn, but in the meantime you're dropping your own pawn on e4.
Yeah, it's it's pretty interesting to see. Now, after queen takes e4, you might feel like, okay, I maybe have something like knight takes d6, but the problem is after rook takes d6, you cannot take back because you will lose your queen on c2. So that's why you cannot take that pawn on d6 yet. But I'm feeling that Jan is aware, well, first of all, he's aware of this line, but he's also aware of the fact that this pawn on d6 is not going anywhere. So he should probably move his queen to a safer spot, getting out of this pin over here, and move his queen, for example, to c3, so that he can actually capture this pawn on d6.
That's most likely what he's considering, where to go with the queen. It's important that he keeps an eye on the c4 pawn, of course, and move like queen d2, triples down on the d5, but forgets about the c4 pawn. So I like queen c3, your suggestion, Anna Maya. Let's see how long he will spend on this move, though, because the time difference is already 2.5 minutes in favor of Hikaru.
Yeah, it's actually really good to point out this time management, because both players were speeding up at the start. They have played 31 moves already, which is quite a lot of moves in such a short time period. In the other games, we saw the games being more slow paced. Typically, they were around move 10 at this stage, but the players are moving on very quickly. And regardless of, I mean, obviously Jan has to take some time at some point, but Hikaru is just playing so quickly. His speed is just phenomenal. And now, as I am saying this, he's spending the time on his move as Jan has played queen b3.
Yeah, I guess this is a critical moment for Hikaru to decide what to do. As you mentioned, the d6 pawn is doomed. There's already 3 of white pieces attacking it. So you need to take it into account that it will be taken next move. But what do you use this one move for? How do you prepare for the position? He chooses queen to b7, making sure that after knight takes d6, he can trade the queens on b3.
Exactly, and that's why he's going for rook takes d6 instead. But yeah, let's have a look what his plan is. So the logical approach obviously is rook takes d6. Okay, there we go, rook takes d6. And now the pawn on e5 becomes a problem. And yeah, I guess you do not, like, you would want to push that pawn to e4, but the problem is, first of all, this diagonal will be closed for the queen. It will not have access to many squares anymore, and you also allow the knights to jump to a square like d4. So that's why he's going for knight 8 to d7, not just f, but f8 to d7, and he's defending the pawn like that.
Yeah, very smart way. And now with queen c6, that queen is stepping out of the b5. So the knight is no longer pinned, but Hikaru simply is improving the situation of the queen to get a little bit closer to the c4 pawn again. The knight on d6 is well placed to guard the pawn. And also, as you said, it's an octopus knight, and octopus knights are pretty powerful. Pretty powerful because they poke a lot of squares into your opponent's camp. So we shall see how Hikaru will continue. Again, a balanced position, equal number of pawns, the exact same pieces, but there's still a bit of spice in the position when it comes to that knight on d6 annoying Black's camp. And for Hikaru, he's got the time advantage. So can he use that to put even more pressure on Jan when it comes to the time management?
Indeed, yeah, we know Hikaru, he's able to create the most insane positions, even if it looks like it's very drawish. He will find a way to make it very exciting and still make it possible for him to win. And as I'm saying this, he is going for the end game. So I'm curious to see what he has in mind. Maybe he's fine taking a draw against Jan. But we have been told actually that Hikaru has a fantastic score against Jan. They have played an enormous amount of games on chess.com, especially in Blitz, where Hikaru has won 156 games against Nepo. So and yeah, Nepo has won 72 games. That is not a bad score at all, but it goes to show how strong Hikaru is and how many times the players have played against each other on chess.com as well.
Yeah, and this is already a blitz format. So even though we are at the Rapid Chess Championship, because there's no increment, we are in the blitz portion of a rapid game. And Hikaru was slightly shaking his head. I think he might be disappointed that the position is getting even more simplified, and the more simplified the position for white, the easier it will be to find the best moves with not much time on the clock.
Yeah, I think he's starting to feel really uncomfortable as the C pawn might start advance towards the promotion square. He's trying to complicate the position still, playing knight d5, and obviously wants to take on e3. But then, yeah, c7 might follow. So, but okay. White still needs to be careful, because with the knights on the board like that, you might run into some checkmate patterns. So White has to be careful here, but it seems like White is doing a great job, and it's hard to stop this pawn on c6.
Yeah, it would take a big blunder, like moving the knight away from d4 to allow knight f3 and then rook h2 checkmate, or knight f3, knight e3. It would be a beautiful pattern, but I think it's not happening. So Hikaru ends up giving up his knight for the very strong pass pawn, sacrifices that knight, and now takes on e3. It's only a pawn for the piece, but there's not much left on the board for White, and you do need to have couple of pawns usually. If the pawns are traded, a rook and knight versus a rook is not going to be winnable.
Yeah, and not even that. Now we see Hikaru taking another pawn, making it 3 versus 1 on one side, making it even more difficult for Jan to convert this position into a full point. So I have a feeling they're going for this repetition that Jan just well, he's not going for it just yet, but he decided to play king h2, which Hikaru just responds with rook g2, and it feels like they will go for this repetition, because I don't see how White can actually convert this position. They have only one pawn left, and they're about to lose this one pawn as well. So I don't think this pawn will last very long.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you that the draw is likely, and as we said it has been agreed. So rook g3 must have been the moment where Hikaru offered the draw, and since king h2, rook g2, king h1, rook g3 will lead to a repetition of moves, yeah, Nepomniachtchi has agreed.
I'm not sure if, like, I might have missed this, Anna, but I'm seeing in the chat that there were draw offers back and forth throughout the game. I just noticed that there were in total number of 5 draw offers offered by both players.
Oh, so there have been a bit of trolling too, or just a jokey way of like, oh, this is a draw, this is still a draw, but I'm gonna continue because this is still a draw.
Oh, I see that. Okay, so Jan started with offering a draw, then Hikaru declined. Hikaru offered a draw, Jan declined, and then it just went back and forth. So yeah, eventually they agreed to draw, but it took a while. It took a while.
It is hilarious to see draw offers in the first place, and that many times between the two, because both of them are such fighting players. You don't see them often clicking on that button.
Indeed. And as we move on to the next game, okay, what is happening in this position? So we have Notterberg with the white pieces playing against Vidit. That's a wonderful matchup, but it looks like it's not looking good for Vidit here, although anything can still happen.
Yeah, White has such a big space advantage and now completely winning position to apparently after B4.
G5.
The
G5
breakthrough.
and the breakthrough, and it's impossible to stop. After f takes G5, there's F6, and if you take on F6, there's simply checkmate. So that's where things end.
Pattern. Yeah, it was missed by Vidit, but to be fair, Black's position was already really difficult to hold. Less time, very passive pieces, lots of pressure on Vidit, so he eventually will need to resign sooner or later. This has been a great game by Nodirbek Abdusattorov here with the white pieces.
Absolutely. I think Norderbeck is going to win this. So let's quickly jump through the other games that are still going on as well. We see Grishuk playing against, if we can be told who's playing with the black piece. I'm not familiar with the username, but maybe you're more familiar with the username.
It's Maxim Matlakov, we are being told.
Oh, okay.
Billy Kimba, the username with the queen endgame where black has an extra pawn, and it's not that easy to capture it because if you take the a4 pawn, then the f4 pawn was gonna hang off the queen g4, queen g3 check, picking up the pawn.
Yeah, and now the problem is queen g3, and you might be able to play a3 on the next move, and the queen will be covering that pawn on a3. So it seems like White had to at least try to take that pawn, because with the pawn on the board, it will definitely be much more difficult to actually make something happen here. And the best White can hope for is a perpetual, but I'm not seeing it happen anytime soon. And the biggest, I mean, obviously, besides the fact that there are two passed pawns on black's camp, you do not want to offer a trade here with the white pieces. You cannot afford to play queen e5, even if the pawn was not there. I'm not even sure if you would be able to convert. I think the king was still, after queen e5, queen takes the king was still close to the h5 pawn, but obviously you can't stop the a pawn. So
yeah, with the a pawn on the board, there's no question that white can never ever trade queens. And speaking of the player that we've just mentioned, Chess Warrior 7197, lots of numbers, but the number that our team has given to us, that the year Nodirbek was born, Hikaru was already a grandmaster by the time Nodirbek was born. He already had been a grandmaster for a year. So that's how young Chess Warrior 7197 is. Grandmaster Nodirbek Abdusattorov, the reigning world rapid chess champion.
That is insane. What an amazing fact right there. And it goes to show that there are so many upcoming talents. And yeah, it's really amazing to see. And as I've also been covering the Junior Speed Chess Championship, you see so many crazy talents coming up in those events. And yeah, it's amazing to see Nodirbek also participating here.
Very true. That these upcoming talents with the Junior Speeches Championship. Now that you mentioned that, a quick plug that we also have, of course, the Junior Speeches Championship all these weeks and days. So make sure to tune into the broadcast, even if you're focusing on this game right now between Grishuk and Matlakov. Let's just bring up real quick because nothing is that urgent as of now with the Queen endgame. We do have the next matchup for you guys if you want a little sneak peek into what's coming up next on Monday, the 2nd of May from 9 a.m. Pacific. That's Grandmaster Brandon Jacobson facing Grandmaster Awander Liang. So make sure to tune in right here on this very same channel where you are listening to us. Now back to the Queen endgame, because the king has made it to f4 and after queen g2 check, this is close to resignation time for Grishuk.
Indeed, yeah, Grishuk is still trying, and I don't blame him because the position is pretty tense still, but it should be winning pretty easily. As king d3 has been played, you can just take on e4 with check, and you can actually play queen e5 check now, and that's over. So yeah, what an amazing win by Matlakov, and unfortunate for Grishuk going down in this game. Let's see if we have more games going on. I'm going to scroll quickly through. This one is over. Do we still have games going? No, all the games actually finished just now. So we're moving on to the next round.
Yeah, but before we head to the next round, let me just thank our sponsor again, because obviously this event would not be possible without our partner, Coinbase. Thanks again to their sponsorship and for proudly supporting our event, the Rapid Chess Championship. The best part about Coinbase is that you can earn crypto by learning about crypto. That's certainly my personal favorite feature, and that you get paid for all that knowledge you're gathering. So go to coinbase.com/chess and get $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up and verify your account today. That is, I think, something that you need to know and you need to consider. What we need to consider is that after 5 rounds, we have 3 players on 4 points. Nepomniachtchi, Amin Tabatabai, and Nodirbek Abdusatorov. We have just mentioned that Nodirbek was born when Hikaru was already a grandmaster.
Absolutely, Anna. The games have started. Okay, I'm going to pull it up. Okay, let's have a look at this one. I was trying to pull it up, and there we go. We have Hikaru against Notterbeck. Just as we were talking about the two, we have them playing against each other.
It had to happen. It was meant to be. Again, they are paired against each other. This time, they are both here, both present. Unfortunately, it happened on a previous occasion when Notterbeck was paired against Hikaru. He had an over-the-board tournament to compete at, so he couldn't make it to that Sunday's event, but we hope that this time, now that they're facing each other in the Swiss format, who knows, if they both qualify, that could be a matchup again. What we see on the board, Anna Maya, lots of pawns there in the middle of the board. Look at that cube, d4, c4, d5, c5, so eventually trades happen.
Yeah, indeed, it looked a little bit complicated, but as we see the moves being made already, they are simplifying the position, and yeah, it comes from the Indian opening, and me myself, I am not too familiar with this line. But I'm seeing that the bishop is developed on b7, typically facing pawns, typically on d5, but sometimes even on e4. So having those pawns out of the way, I think it's safe to say that black has a very good opening, but there's still some tension going on the pawns on d4 and c5, and black has to make sure that they recapture the pawn with a knight or a rook, because if they have to recapture it with the pawn, their pawn structure will not be as great anymore as it is right now. So definitely a lot of tension going on there, but so far I like how black is dealing with the opening.
Yeah, it seems like a very balanced position where the structure is going to be symmetrical once the d pawn is traded for the c pawn. If, as you mentioned, black can take back on c5 with the knight or the rook. Rook c7 is a typical move to do a similar maneuver as the queen of white has done. Queen c2, queen b1 was Hikaru's maneuver. And after rook c7, black can immediately go to a8 if they want to double down on that long diagonal. That often is the case in a structure like this.
Indeed, yeah, and white is going for rook fd1 over here, strengthening the position in the center. Yeah, I'm trying to see where white's play is. I'm guessing what Hikaru is trying to do here is going for that d5 move. Now, if you allow d5 in this position, not only will your bishop on b7 be stuck, but it will also allow white to create a lot of space in the position, which is why Notterbeck decides to take on d4. And yeah, the bishop on the b7 is perfectly fine, and it feels kind of symmetrical, the position.
Very symmetrical, and after the queen traded, it would be quite a simplified position where a draw would not be unlikely as an outcome. Time management wise too, the players are on a fairly similar time situation. So I think for Hikaru, it might be a bit of a disappointment that there's not more play, that there's not more dynamic factor in this position, and it's petering out to a draw.
I think so too. Both players are around 8 minutes, which and like it feels like they've advanced so much in a position already in the game that it's kind of rare to see the players having so much time left, while there's not a lot of pieces left in position, and also not a lot of tension in the position. As you mentioned, there's not much to play for anymore, and Hikaru is still trying to create some play here with b4.
b4 is an interesting move that stops any piece of black from going to c5. So instead of the c5 square, Nodirbek chooses knight to e5.
Indeed,
B5.
and we see b5. And what Hikaru's trying to do here is he's trying to fix the pawns here on the queen side. And this could be potentially really good for him on a later stage in the game, because right now it doesn't do much. I mean, obviously the pawns are not able to move, but you're not losing for this reason. And as we're saying this, queen a8, there is queen a1. It's incredible. Why would you?
The
bar is going up because there's queen a1, and
just when we said that this position is solid, it's going to peter out to a draw. Maybe that could have been Nodirbek's thought too, because he didn't feel the danger. He didn't sense the danger. And now, as you pointed out, if Hikaru plays queen a1, I think he will find it. I think he's seeing it, that that long diagonal is extremely strong for white's pieces. After queen a1, how can black try to tangle out that situation? There aren't many squares for the knight.
So black is obviously trying to put pressure on this pawn on g2, which makes a lot of sense, right? Like we have the bishop on b7, and you also mentioned early queen a8. He didn't play it, and now he played it.
Oh.
He's a move too late with the idea. He got worried about the pawn on g2, as I was trying to explain. And let me pull it up once again. Queen a8. Now, the reason why queen a1 is so strong is because we don't mind losing that pawn as much. Because there is a lot of tension going on along this diagonal. This tension is much stronger than what is going on over here. So let me quickly show you what is going on here. After bishop takes g2, there's a beautiful move, knight c6, and look what is happening. You cannot take this knight with your knight because bishop takes g7, and if bishop takes c6, we take here with the pawn, and your knight is in trouble here. And as I'm actually explaining this, Anna, I'm not seeing a square for this knight.
Yeah, this was gonna be the end of that knight, basically. If you have to play f6, that's usually not
f6
a good sign.
is indeed the move, and apparently it is still losing. You're not losing the knight, but you're losing the position because you cannot deal with this pawn. You will just take the knight off the board, and you will improve the position with either bishop c4, you will move the queen over to c3, and it's going to be very difficult for you to stop this pawn. And the biggest reason being that you have a dark squared bishop that is not able to defend against this pawn, and also because you have a bishop that is going to look right at the promotion square, and it's going to be very difficult for you with the black pieces to stop this. So this is why queen a1 was so strong, and it makes a lot of sense that Hikaru did not feel like going for this line because it was very complicated. So as we move on, we see that queen a1 has been played a move later, which is too late as there's knight c4 now, and black has a lot of play here.
Yeah, it was a mischance, but as we looked into queen a1, it was a lot more complex than what it seemed. Now, with a move later and with the bishop guarding the g2 square from f1, it is no longer an advantage for white. But I'm sure that Hikaru will try to press if he sees some chances. At the same time, if we take a look at the time situation, it's the first time that Hikaru is lower on time in the event. Still not a big deal. There's not that big of a gap, and he's got over 5 minutes. But it shows that the position was really complex, and he calculated a lot of different lines.
Indeed, and it goes to show, I mean, obviously this line was insane and it's very difficult to spot, but it goes to show how practical Nodirbek is playing. He's not making it easy for Hikaru, and the only chance Hikaru had was some crazy line that required a lot of different calculations, and I mean, he's already down on the clock and he cannot afford to spend more on this. And bishop f1 just seemed like the logical and natural approach to this position.
Yeah, it's a hard one. And now if Hikaru doesn't play the most precise way, it could even be the case that black takes the initiative. So knight c6, I think, was a must to block the c file before black could trade the light squared bishop and infiltrate into Hikaru's position through the c file.
Indeed, and Anna, look what we're seeing right now. Knight takes b5 is in the position, and now white is forced to take on e7, and we see all the pieces being traded off. We might see a draw soon, but yeah, we see another queen trade being offered, and I'm expecting to see the draw coming in very soon, and it will be a great performance by the young star Nutterback.
Yeah, it has been just a very smooth way of defending, so to say, ever since that Queen A1 was missed by Hikaru. So Hikaru had his chance, but it was not an easy one to spot. And once it was missed, Nodirbek managed to hold the position, equalize, and even ask Hikaru some questions like, hey, there's this B passport, you need to take care of it. You cannot just play whatever you want. So of course it is a theoretical draw usually in cases like this. The pawn cannot promote itself with the rook guarding it very well from the B file, the B6 rook, but there's certainly no danger for Nodirbek either of losing the game.
Right, and yeah, the players still try to go for something here, but I'm expecting a draw very soon. Now, what Notterbeck is trying here is very sneaky, and I just wanted to highlight this. So he's letting go of the pawn on h6, but once you leave the b file with your rook, you allow black to also remove the rook from the b1 square, and the rook can go anywhere really, and I will just promote here on b1. So that's why he doesn't mind letting go of the pawn on h6, and obviously Hikaru is not going to take that pawn, but as we move on we see that okay, Notterbeck is pretty much repeating his moves, and Hikaru is just moving along the b file, and I'm expecting a repetition very soon actually.
Yes, this is going to be a draw, and also we heard that the game of the Championship was a draw in a one-move game. That probably is the shortest game of the event so far.
Oh, wow.
In 12 weeks of Rapid Chess Championship, I don't think there has been any game shorter than a one-move draw.
That is indeed quite rare. You don't see that happen often, but we are also have been told that I mean might have had some tech issues, so that could also have been some part of it.
we hope everything will be fine on his end, of course, so that he can rejoin the event. As you mentioned, this rook game is a draw. They are still making a couple of moves back and forth, but the result should still be the same.
Right, there we go. Okay, let's move on to a different game now. This game lasted pretty long, but what a wonderful performance by Notterbeck, making it such a close game, making it actually very difficult for Hikaru.
Yes, it was only that one single moment, Queen A1, missed by both players, how dangerous it would have been, that long diagonal Queen Bishop battery. Now, when it comes to this position, an exchange up for Daniel Dubov with the black pieces, but white does have a pawn and a very strong knight on e4 to compensate for it. And whenever you take on d5, it allows knight f6, so black simply acknowledges that that pawn was so strong, you need to give the exchange back.
Yeah, I wanted to say that we're not the only ones dropping rooks today, but I think this was intentional, so I'm gonna try to refrain from claiming this statement.
You're doing great, Anna Maria, don't worry. So this seems to be a drawish rook endgame. I wonder if there's any other game we could tune into, because I think here
absolutely
most likely the result will be a draw unless there's some big mistake. Well, this is a lot more complex.
Indeed, there's a lot going on here, and where is this knight going? Actually, it's just free right now. The knight on d2 is free.
It is, and possibly it couldn't move earlier because the queen and rook of black on the second rank is targeting the king. So that knight was blocking the way to not get checkmated with queen takes f2 and queen g2 or queen h2. But that means that it will now be lost. I guess white is trying with rook takes e6 and queen h5 to get some counter chances after the piece was going to be captured. And for that reason, We see king h6. Was that the move, really?
It was the move, and apparently it's the only move that wins this game. Can you believe that?
And then Dragon found that king h6.
Indeed, he found it, and I'm still starstruck. Why? Let's have a look why bishop takes d2 was not winning, because it seems like one of the most logical moves on this planet. But after bishop takes d2, there's rook takes e6, and after king f7, I'm not trying to save my rook here. I am going for the repetition, and after king takes e6, there's queen e8 check, and there is no way the king can ever escape all my checks. I'm just gonna follow the king around. Now, the most logical way to try to escape those checks is obviously through f6, but after queen f8, king g6, there's queen e8, and after king h6, I just go to h8. So we just repeat that. After king h7, there's queen h5. And I'm just going back and forth on this diagonal, going back and forth, h5, e8. And you force the repetition at one point. So as we're going back to the position, this is what Andrei King realized and played this fantastic move, king h6.
That is an incredible move. But now, after seeing the perpetual check, even with the rook sacrifice after knight and rook sacrifice, it makes perfect sense that he had to prioritize the defense of his king. Andrei King, by the way, for those that may have missed last 2 weeks, week 11 Rapid Chess Championship, he is the current winner. He won last Sunday ahead of a very stacked field. So he's coming off of a very good event from the previous weekend of the Rapid Chess Championship, and I'm sure he wants to qualify again and continue that way.
Absolutely. Wow, what a great performance. And yeah, so Gregorio is still trying to make a miracle happen here, but as he tries to open files up here towards the black king, g takes h5, and everything seems to be covered here for black. So I'm expecting a resignation very soon, as not only he's losing the knight over here, but he's also just stuck with the pieces. There is no counterplay. This pawn on c4 is not gonna go far, and the position is simply collapsing off black. So I suggest we, after seeing this amazing sequence of moves, like what could have potentially been in the game, I think it's time to move to a different game that is still going on. And there we go. Yeah, there's a piece that got taken. Okay, let's see what Anish is doing against Igor Kovalenko.
Oh, that queen of white has magically disappeared from the board. So I think adding up the math here, 1 queen for Anish, no queen for Kovalenko. I think Anish is doing great.
I think so too, and especially now queen b5. It must have been some sacrifice early on in the game that we were not able to see, but this should be winning. I don't see a fortress, especially since there's 4 pawns of black here against 3. So I'm guessing, okay, e3, there we go. And this should be winning as well. So let's have a look at a different game. We see Vladimir Fedosiev against Alexander Grishuk now, and they're both around 1 minute on the clock.
In a chaotic position, as it should be. We love to see this. It's so complex. Black has an exchange up, but white's got a bishop and 2 pawns to compensate for the rook. At the same time, the white king is really open. That b file is only blocked by the queen, usually not a good sign if you need to block that way, and might mean that at some point the queen could be in trouble if a rook gets to b8.
Absolutely. So white does have some compensation, as in they have a couple of pawns for the exchange, but it's not enough. As you mentioned, the king is way too exposed. If the king had some proper coverage, it would be much more unclear. But now, especially with the pawn from h6 gone from the board, I would say that Grishuk is going to convert this to win, unless something crazy happens on the clock. But we see rook e7 threatening checkmate. I don't expect Grishuk to mess this up.
Yeah, this seems to be a very convincing way of finishing the game. Bishop e4 is a creative way of blocking the e file, and the bishop couldn't be taken because the rook on d8 was hanging. But after queen a5 check, the tactics are all working out for Grishuk. He just needs to double check. That's why he has been calculating what were the best squares. But with 55 seconds on the clock versus 12, and another one of those doubled e5 threats, so the rook is about to enter on e1. It's not checkmate just yet, but it's very close.
We're getting there. Yeah, I was also trying to figure out where is the checkmate, because Vladimir is making it really difficult to get himself checkmated. But in the end, he was not able to stop all the threats, and Grishuk wins this game. Let's see if we still have some games going on. Yep, there we go. Oh, just as we tune in, we see a resignation here. Yeah, this seems to be clearly winning. Oh, as we join in the game, they finish.
Just got checkmated by Matlakov. So that's a great result for Maxim Matlakov. That is Billy Kimba taking the full point from Jospam. What a round this has been. And we are also being told that the Takeshi on Amin's side has been solved. So he's back. He's ready for the next round, and so are the rest of the field. Shall we take a quick look at what's in store for tomorrow? The knockouts format is different, as you mentioned. The top 8 players from today will qualify, and the matches are single elimination format. Very exciting. It means that one game and you are out. There only will be a blitz or bullet tiebreaker if the rapid game is drawn. There is increment tomorrow. That's an important difference. And also there is motivation to finish as high as possible in today's event, because the higher the seed, the more likely that you are choosing the color in your match. So I think that card, I might be mistaken, but you have a choice. You can choose the higher seed will choose in every matchup if they want to start with the white pieces, which usually is the case. Like, who would not want to start with the white pieces, right?
Yeah, especially at this level, it matters so much. Like for me, myself, you know, it's fine. It's nice to play with the white pieces, but I don't really mind if I play with the black pieces. It's for me almost even. My preparation does not go as deep as the top players, obviously. So I can imagine like the preference they have. So yeah, you definitely want to have a higher seed in this event.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and therefore the motivation to finish at the very top of the top 8. So you want to be in the top 8, but also within the top 8, you want to make sure that you are in the first or second place.
Right, and so this round 6 has been finished, and as I just wanted to say that round 6 has been very exciting, and we have 4 people leading with 4.5 points. We are entering round 7.
Entering round 7, and sorry for correcting the rule. It is indeed that the higher seed gets the white pieces. Hard for me to keep up with so many changes, but what does not change is that the Rapid Chess Championship is an excellent event, providing so much entertainment, education, chess knowledge for anyone who wants to learn from these super grandmasters. The best chess players in the world are competing in the Rapid Chess Championship. And Anna-Maya, we mentioned that Amin might have had a slight technical issue, but he's back and he's already playing here with the black pieces. They traded queens. What opening is this?
Yeah, they traded queens. Amin is back. And yeah, let's have a look at the start real quick. We see that Matlakov opened with 1d4, and it turned into the Queen's Gambit, the also well-known opening that we all have learned about some time ago from the Queen's Gambit movie series, that is. And yeah, it looks like a very well-known line. Bishop f5, queen f3. Okay, this seems to be a little bit different. Typically, black goes for a very solid and safe setup, but this allows white to be very aggressive. We see, yeah, this is how the queens were traded off, resulting in a poor pawn structure on black's side, but at the same time, they have the bishop pair, so that evens it out at least a little bit, and that's why we are so early on in this endgame. And as I quickly scroll through the games, we see that, both players are improving their position slowly, and they're trying to find a way to get it in, to find a weakness in the opponent's side.
Indeed, I was only just going to add to that, Anna Maria. You have described the situation very well. That the time situation impresses me a lot too. That Ami has barely spent any time. He's got a 2-minute time advantage, and he's still making every single move as if it was a blitz or bullet game.
Indeed, and that could be very promising for him. On one hand, you might feel like, okay, if you play really quickly, you might make some inaccuracies, and it's in this format that you really need to try to balance this. Like, do you want to play as perfect as possible but spend quite some time, or do you want to play like a little bit inaccurate, just a few inaccuracies here and there, but still have a solid position, just have something to play for, but be really quick and be up on the clock by a lot? And I feel like if you are able to balance this perfectly, you will be able to succeed most of the times here.
Very true. And on the camera, we see obviously Billy Kimba. Those of you who are not familiar with the username, we too had to learn that that's Grandmaster Maxim Matlakov's username. We will come back to this game for sure. I just heard that it's Hikaru versus Anish. Is that correct? That's the rounds pair?
That is correct. Do you want to have a look, Anna?
Oh, please.
Let's have a look. Oh. Okay. Whoa, it's very advanced, Anna. This position, they traded a lot of pieces already.
They have, which is not that good of a sign. White does have space advantage, but it feels like Hikaru has been handling the position very well and accurately, exchanging all the pieces necessary to not get into any issues. So a simplified position where there's still a question on the queen side that b6 pawn is hanging, and whether you guard it, take it, push, that is a question that Hikaru needs to answer now.
Indeed, and what is really noticeable here is that this time Hikaru is 2 minutes, almost 2 minutes lower on the clock than Anish, which is really remarkable because typically Hikaru is the one playing very quickly, but it seems like Anish is in known territory. He knows what he's doing. He's in his repertoire, so that might have been causing the difference in the time situation. But having 6 minutes on the clock in such a position is not too bad, as a lot of pieces have been traded off, and the game might end in, well, maybe not in a couple of moves, but the position is much more simple to play than typically.
Yeah, I agree that there's, of course, still some accuracy needed, but it feels like Hikaru now, with the regrouping of his pieces, the knight making it to e5 shortly, or c5, so after knight d7, those squares are available. It is still more space for white, and Anish is trying to keep the pressure now with queen to c6. So in case the knight jumps, he has a check on e8.
Indeed, and that might be difficult to deal with, but with the knight on e5, it is much easier to deal with that, as the pawn on f7 will be defended very well. And now we see a very original, creative knight trade.
Yes, queen d4 was a very precise move by Hikaru, not moving the knight away, but threatening white's knight. And this should lead to a perpetual check, I believe, since black is threatening the c2 pawn and the a5 pawn at the same time. Anish doesn't have a way to continue playing on. But let's just go back to the moment with queen c6, because I think for a lot of us, it would have been hard to deal with this situation where white has space advantage. If you move the knight, queen e8, and then even in case of knight e5, I'm guessing it can get dangerous with queen e8 check, king h7, and potentially f4, pushing that knight away. The f7 pawn is hanging, so this position could have fallen apart quick enough if it wasn't for queen d4. Very well spotted by Hikaru.
You're absolutely right, and it looks indeed very dangerous, but apparently black is doing just fine after knight c4 in this position. It's very unnatural.
So what happens at if queen f7 is queen e3, so we can't take the pawn just yet. It looks so scary. I hate that the engine is cold-blooded as hell, no matter what's going on the board. Yeah. It was a draw the whole time.
Yeah, they just didn't want to make it too complicated, so they just traded everything off, and yeah, they just agreed on the draw like that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not easy to spot this, and I think that's also why those players are not going for such complicated lines, for the simple reason that if you allow your opponent to do something, you will have to pay for it sooner or later. And even if it's right now, if it's equal, practically speaking, it will be very difficult to defend it for either side, because not only does white have some problems, but black has also some problems at the same time. So it's like a give or take, you know, like it's pretty double-edged.
Yeah, it's true, as you mentioned, that they always find a way to not enter complications unnecessarily. So there, of course, are many complex and chaotic positions in middle games especially, but if there's a simpler way, if there's a more clear way to follow, that's where super GMs will head to, unless it's necessary, absolutely necessary, to get into messy situations.
Indeed. And before we move on to the next game, we were told that the stats between Hikaru against Anish in Blitz are very, I wouldn't say very even, but Hikaru has won 12 games, whereas Giri has won 4 games against Hikaru, and there were 7 draws between them. So it's pretty balanced. It's not a very big gap, and it shows how the players are around this. I mean, obviously they're around the same level, but yeah, it's not a very big gap over there.
Yeah, and of course, these are the stats we have for the chess.com battles. Obviously, they have faced each other over the board and also at other online events. They have played against each other many, many, many times, whether it's on the chessboard or tweet battles, you know, comments here and there. Frenemies, we love to see that.
Absolutely. And we see now in the game of Jan versus Nutterback that Jan is completely crushing this as he's up a pawn, and okay, he still needs to work for the full point as Nutterback's rook is much more active on d4, tying the rook down to the pawn on b4, but at the same time, what is Nutterback able to do, because this rook is very actively placed, but this king is stuck on b8. It has no entrance to, for example, attack this pawn on b4.
Very true. After the check, the king simply goes back to g2 and is fine on g2 because there's no follow-up check there after rook d4, king g3. There could be another check on the third rank, but then you push f3 and there's no follow-up.
Indeed, and yeah, it's a matter of being very patient and to convert this position, and we see that's what Jan is doing here. He has now a passed pawn, so I think he's just gonna push it all the way, supported by the king, and soon we will probably see a resignation, as it will be very difficult for Nutterback to defend this.
The king is trying to make it to the king's side, but as you mentioned, this is a really tough endgame for black, with the activity of the white rook and the extra pawn. That helps a lot to have an extra pawn, which is a fast pawn.
Yeah, exactly. And now we see king h6, and yeah, the position is just falling apart. And there's, I mean, I think a miracle should happen for Nutterback to still save this. But obviously you require technique to finish this off. And I think Jan is just showing us that right now.
Let's see
there
how
we
the
go.
technique is. Very well played indeed, this rook maneuver. And once the h7 pawn is gone, it is... I was gonna say this game over, but it's not. With 2
This
extra
is
pawns.
unbelievable. Rook h7, and if you take on h7, there's king takes... Wait a second, you're not taking it. You're not taking it, of course not.
Cannot move. You move the rook away, you get a check. The king cannot move, the pawns cannot move. It is an incredible position. The Barish is smiling in pain a little bit, I guess. It's one of those situations where you admire how much of an endgame study this position is. It is a draw. White cannot do anything to make progress.
He is absolutely in shock and he cannot believe what he has just done. As I was about to suggest to switch the game, he allowed this position to happen and his king is just stuck on h6. Unbelievable.
That is such an incredible turn of events, and apparently it wasn't necessary to go for the pawn immediately. So just because it was taken, that's what changed the matters. It wasn't indeed needed to take, but it's such a tempting move. You would assume it's completely winning. Rook takes h7.
Indeed, and apparently the only way to win this position, they finished the game into a draw. Let me quickly show you what was supposed to be played instead. So after king f6, the only move to win here is rook f8 check, making sure the king goes away, cornering our king on the edge of the board, and then you can consider, well, obviously you cannot take just yet, but you will push the f pawn, and sooner or later you'll be able to capture the pawn on h7. But what is important is that you get your king out of here. You cannot have your king on the edge of the board, and that is what was a problem in this situation. So very instructive endgame, and it goes to show that even the top players can mess up a completely winning position just like that. And it's incredible because I did not expect this to happen at all, Anna.
This came out of the blue just when we thought that it's, you play a few moves and then you resign because there's nothing to play for. After rook takes h7, it is a draw with the rook move, rook e8. A beautiful, very instructive endgame study that Navamyashi will remember for a long time. I'm afraid for him, this was a painful endgame study.
Absolutely. Yeah, we all have to go through this at least once in our lives when we play this game. But yeah, sometimes we just need to be reminded that these kind of things happen. And as we move on to the next game, we see Dmitry Andreikin playing against Vidit. And yeah, what an imbalanced position. We see the two rooks versus a queen. I wouldn't be so sure which side I want to take here.
Yeah, this is a big mess with the queen versus the two rooks, but also that there's this d3 push. So it's a pass pawn that can be taken twice if white wants to. White takes on g6 first, but by taking on d3, you are opening up the e-file for black's queen. So I'm guessing that's why white is thinking. Andreikin here with the white pieces, the winner of last Sunday's event. And
absolutely. That's why e3 has been played.
So he goes for e3, meaning that the pawn on d3 stays alive. It's a protected pass pawn for Vidit.
Exactly. And at the same time, so the problem is that this pawn is not able to push as much. The rook is stopping that pawn. And what Vidit is worried about here is that this combination of two rooks and knight is going to be so powerful, making the queen feel very restricted. And I think he was actually worried about the move rook d8. And that actually traps his queen. And okay, maybe not trapping, but definitely in trouble, as after queen e6, I believe there are problems on the back rank, threatening rook h8 checkmate. So there's a lot of things to be worried about here, which is why he did not want to allow that to happen.
Yeah, and that could be the reason why Andreikin decided to not take the pawn in the first place, to not open the e5 for checks for the queen. But now Vidit finds a way to get the queen in through the g4 square, and then queen f3. Also, bishop takes h4 is a threat.
Absolutely. And now with the king being super exposed for the queen over here, Vidit decides to take the knight off the board, which makes a lot of sense. And now queen f3 check, and he's going to take this pawn. If king g1, you will just promote here with check even. So this seems to be going south for Dmitry Andreikin.
Yeah, it started well, and it was a very complex position that anyone could win. But now it is Vidit who should be able to convert. At the same time, they are really low on time, both players. So the time factor can still strike in, and mistakes can happen, like this Queen of 6 move, which seems to be not that accurate.
Yeah, Anna, apparently, so I was just going to point out that there is one thing you might want to be worried about with the black pieces, because there was rook takes g7 on the board. And the reason why we're not afraid of this is because of king h8. We just go hide there and we're safe, because after a check, we move to g8. And once we get another check, king f8, we are fine. We're not getting checkmated, but it is very complicated, and I really want to point this out later on, but let's have a look first at how the game is going to end, and later we will have a bit quicker and better look at how the game could have continued, because it's a really insane line.
I fully agree. This was so good. Beautiful after he takes d4, d2. That pawn is unstoppable.
What a turnaround! It seemed to be equal again, and now there's another queen on the board, but now there's only one rook left on Dimitri Andreikin's side.
Only one rook, and this is not the position where it would be a fortress. Sometimes it could be the case, but I'm afraid for Andreikin, this doesn't qualify as one of those. He's trying. He's keeping the rook on the third rank, so it's guarding the a3 pawn. And that rook is protected either by the f2 pawn or the king, so he's only going back and forth.
And now queen d5. Yeah, I was waiting for the moment that he would have to. Oh, but he can still. Yeah, he goes g4. I mean, so it's still not over. But okay, the g4 pawn dropped, and yeah, slowly but surely, Vidit is going to convert this in a very fashionable way. And I think, okay, you can still try to hold this, obviously. You have to be really precise here if you want to sacrifice your queen for the rook and the pawn, because you might be able to very soon. Okay, f3 is a nice, it's an interesting way to deal with this, but it should not be enough. Queen f2 now, and you just, okay. Yeah, you just take this pawn.
Yeah, that was very precise, the checks and taking the pawn. As you mentioned, Anna-Maja, earlier, I think white was in Zugzwang. He pushed f3 because of the rook e3. Black was going to sacrifice the queen already, I believe. That was a very instructive endgame conversion, queen versus rook by Vidit. And Anna-Maja, you wanted to show an earlier moment because it was a mess.
Absolutely, Anna. So after queen f3, we were talking about, so yeah, the crucial moment in this game, obviously Vidit still won the game, but it's really important to highlight this really insane moment. We saw that Vidit played queen f6, which was allowing Dimitri Andreikin to make a draw, well, to equalize the position, that is. But instead, we were not... we were allowing actually to have rook takes g7 happen here. So the best move here is to simply push the pawn here and accept the fact that there is a capture on g7. So after rook takes g7, we go king h8, not h6, because that's checkmate and one. So we're just hiding here, and after rook g7 check, we go to g8, and after the logical move rook c, g7, king f8, and then the next move, you might be worried about a move like rook a7, but what is the problem here is that I am going to promote with check, and the way that I'm going to do is I'm forcing the king to go to g4 and then promote to queen, and that's how you win this game. And from this moment on, it should be very easy with two queens to convert this. So that was a missed opportunity by Vidit. He still won the game, but it's really important to highlight that it was possible for him to win earlier, but obviously they were quite low on time already, around 2 minutes on the clock. So I can imagine he did not want to risk much there. So that was a really beautiful way of dealing with this position.
Indeed, and that leaves us with the standings having 4 players on 5 points, tied for the first place. That is Janina Pamlishi, Nadirbek Abdusattorov, Maxim Matlakov, and Amin Tabatabey, Hikaru, Vidit, and Gandevam. If you could help me out, Anna-Maja, there with the usernames. The 3 of them are on 4.5 points. And
right, Arjun.
Remember, Oh, Arjun, thank you very much, Arjun Arigaisi. Let's just remember that the top 8 places qualify to tomorrow's Sunday knockout. So at the moment, it would be a huge tie for the 8th place, but with a better tiebreak score, Grishuk would be in, Anish, Jospem, and several other grandmasters would be out. So everything is at stake here for Anish Giri, first and foremost in this game, if he wants to qualify to tomorrow.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm suggesting to have a look at the game of Anish against Arjun. There's a lot at stake for this game as they are trying to qualify for the top 8, and as you mentioned, they are very close when it comes to the points. But what matters in the end, besides the points, is the tiebreak. And on tiebreak, it seems like Anish still needs to win his games to have a chance to qualify. And as we are in round 8, there's a lot at stake right now. Every half point matters. So if you spoil too much, you will not be able to qualify. So let's see how they're doing.
Bishop g5 here by Anish, and it still seems to be theory, at least for Anish. He's very fast, 9 minutes and 34 seconds on the clock for Anish with no increment. So we're starting with 10 minutes. There's no increment in Saturday's format. Now that knight on g5 is a dangerous piece. If you get to play queen to h5 or queen d3, that can create a lethal threat of checkmate on h7, which I think Arjun is considering whether to deal with now by pushing the knight away, or you're waiting for the pawn on h7 to be attacked and then you push h6 or g6.
Absolutely, Anna. And Arjun decided to fix the pawn structure of his by taking on e5, and now he doesn't have the double pawn position in the center anymore. But the problem he still is dealing with is the fact that the bishop is looking at the pawn on d5, and I'm not seeing how the pawn will move to d4 anytime soon. But at the same time, he's now putting pressure on the pawn on e5. So it's pretty much like he has some chances to play for something, but he is also a problem to deal with, making his bishop not the greatest. So I would say that the knight on g5 is much better, especially if we can get it all the way to d4. It does do a lot on g5, but as soon as black plays a move like h6, we will go back to f3 and then control the square d4. So I'm seeing a lot of chances here for white, and I'm curious to see how Arjun is going to deal with this.
Yes, and the question was again asked what we mentioned, that once the queen is on d3 or h5, you will need to react. Of course, the threat on h7, g6 is blocking the diagonal. Now, if white wants to insist, you can also still play queen h3 to continue threatening checkmate, and black is forced to push either the h or f pawns to defend.
Absolutely, queen h3, and yeah, you have to play h5, and then you might have to worry about moves like g4. It might not be in a position right away since the e5 pawn is still in trouble, but it's definitely an idea for in the future as soon as you have fixed the problem on e5. But it seems like Anish is maybe not still in his prep, but given the time situation, he knows what he's doing, and he has a very nice position. So yeah, it seems like his preparation is paying off.
It does seem like a very good preparation, and even if it's not a move-by-move preparation at this rate, for sure he was very, very aware of this idea, the bishop g5 trade to get the knight to g5 and pose problems on the king side to black. Arjun is still thinking, because h5 is the obvious move, but also by pushing the f pawn, the queen from c7 would be defending h7, so he can go for f6 or f5.
Indeed, yeah. That is another possibility, obviously. And now he decides to play f6, but the move f6 weakens so many squares, and it allows a pawn to go to e6, which may pose some more problems for black, since the knight will now jump to d4, defending the pawn on e6, and black is being restricted a lot in this position. Your rook will not go to f7 to try to defend. You may play rook e7, but it will be difficult for the pieces to navigate as the space of the pieces gets really smaller and smaller. So queen f4 has been played on knight d4. Arjun is still trying to go for some activity, but it seems like Anish is doing a great job dealing with the position. But now what does he do, since there are two attackers on this pawn on e6?
Yeah.
Okay, he ignores it.
Moving the rook was not possible because the rook is guarding the d4 knight. So queen d3 is a very smart way of not dealing with the hanging pawn on e6, but attacking another one, a more important pawn in a way, because that is next to where the king is. Queen takes g6 is a big threat, so black has to address this. And once the pawn is protected on g6, then we have a chance to move the rook to e1, now that the knight on d4 is guarded.
Indeed, and that's why Arjun is trying to trade off the queens off the board so that he will have much better chances in the end game, especially since this pawn on e6 is still very, very vulnerable. But that's why Anish is not going for the trade. He keeps the queens on the board, and he's eyeing on that square h6 where he really wants to go to sooner or later.
He is definitely trying to infiltrate black's position. Still, remember how it started with that attack on h7. He kept weakening black's pawn structure, and he is aiming to do that with queen h6. Maybe not as of now, but that certainly is one of the possible routes in the future. He will try to make sure that the e6 pawn doesn't drop, because that would be the only issue if black manages to double rooks with rook e8, and then all the black pieces are attacking that poor pawn.
Indeed, yeah, it is a lot of commitment for that one pawn, but it's the only way to get out of this position. And as we are talking about this pawn on e6, it is now being defended by another pawn on f5. So it feels like we will never ever see the pawns, both pawns disappear from e6 and f5. What a beautiful position Anish has created for himself.
Yeah, I'm puzzled by g5 because it feels like it only worsens black position to allow f5. So earlier, at least the pawn is guarding the f5 square, and you don't allow that connected pawn structure. But I guess it's just that black was already in trouble, and bishop takes e6 was running into rook e1, plus the queen. Goodness me, the queen was trapped.
The queen was trapped, so it was his only way of saving the queen. And yeah, he had just had no choice anymore, indeed. And that's why he felt the need to play g5. You're pointing out really well that g5 doesn't look as great because it allows f5, but it was in this position that he had just no choice anymore. And that is the consequences of having your pieces very poorly developed. And there's not much you could do about that. I just feel like it is Anish's prep that just paid off extremely well.
Yes, this has been a very well played game by Anish Giri, who needs this point. Remember that he, at the moment, is not in the top 8. He wouldn't qualify if the tournament ended after 7 rounds. Luckily for him, this round and one more, 9 rounds in total, will determine who are the top 8 players who will make it to tomorrow's knockout stage. The queen d6, beautiful attack. Queen f4 was obligatory to guard the c7 rook, but this endgame, unfortunately for Arjun, is a very sad one to play.
Indeed, this pawn chain, it's a really small pawn chain, but it's the most powerful I've ever seen. You rarely see such a strong pawn chain, and typically you would want to break this pawn chain, which you do by attacking the pawn that is at the back the most, which is in this case f5, obviously. But whenever you try to attack this pawn, I will quietly jump back with my knight, and I will say you will never touch this pawn ever.
It's extremely hard for black, and also shows the difference here between the 2 minor pieces, the knight of white being such a strong piece, and that bishop, the poor bishop on c8 cannot do anything with the structure being e6, f5. Usually you don't want your pawns to be on the same color as the opponent's bishop, but in this case, those pawns are extremely powerful, and well, of course it's a pass pawn, but even if it wasn't for the pass pawn, they are limiting the mobility of the black bishop.
That's a very good point you're making there, Anna. And now you might feel like, okay, we're seeing that the position, material wise, it's a bit balanced. We see that white is up a pawn, but the eval, the engine is saying it's +6, and it's for the simple reason that black is lacking mobility, and it's really difficult for black to find any sort of counterplay, which is why it is so winning for white. And yeah, you can win in many ways here, as long as you do not blunder the pawn on g2. That's important.
Definitely an important one, and also not to mouse slip in case you push g4 instead of g3. Things can happen.
Things can happen, especially in this time control. Now with the clock situation, we see that Anish has 5 minutes on the clock, so I am fully trusting him that he is not going to mess up out of the blue. He has plenty of time to find the best, well, one of the best moves. He doesn't need to play perfectly in this position as long as he maintains the advantage in this position.
Yeah, this seems to be an easy one to convert. Let's just wait for maybe 1 or 2 moves of Anish to confirm, but I think we know that he will find the most precise way to finish the game. Rook c4 immediately threatens rook h4, and even after the trade on g3, that open h5 also points out that the black king could almost be checkmated.
Absolutely. Yeah, the next move will probably be rook h1, and after king g5, there must be a checkmate. You're actually setting up a checkmate with g4. And since we don't care about losing the knight anymore, because we are threatening rook h5 checkmate with or without the knight on the board. So I think he will be going for that checkmate pattern, and that should be game over for Arjun in this game.
Yeah, Anish, I think, will spot that g4 pattern, that you can indeed give up the knight. He gives the check first and then pushes g4. So the knight is being sacrificed because rook h5 is checkmate. Black has no way of stopping it.
Absolutely, and that's why we see Arjun resigning. What a beautiful game by Anish. So effortless, so smooth.
Anna, did you see a little shoulder movement there to celebrate the win? Anish Giri wins and is now in the top 8, but there's one more round to go.
Absolutely. I saw in the corner of my eye the little shoulder shake, so that was really awesome to see.
We need more GM celebratory dances. I think that would make a great gift for chess.com. Just saying.
I think so too, Anna. I would love to have those. They will be used forever. They will stay on the channel forever.
Yeah, I think we need those. We need those to accompany the blank keys. But there's still games going on in this penultimate round. Hikaru here with the white pieces against Maxim Matlakov. After the queen check, Black needs to be careful where to place the king, because this queen and knight combo is tricky.
Indeed. Typically, you are very worried to retreat to g8. As you do not have so much space towards f8 and e8. You don't have so much space there. But in this situation, you're not that worried, as once the knight goes to f6, you'll be able to hide on f8. There's plenty of space for the king. So as the knight, one of the knights is still on the other side of the board, you should still be fine. But it's definitely not a pleasant position for Matlakov. And here we see some checks being given. And I would be worried about a move like knight e5 on the next move.
Yes, this is certainly still quite some pressure on Black, as you mentioned, not easy to defend. Also time pressure, so pressure on the board, pressure on the clock. Hikaru here with the white pieces definitely will not repeat moves.
Indeed, he was... well, maybe he was trying to see what the response would be after this. But yeah, he's continuing the game, playing knight e5. And what is the follow-up? Because one of the ideas you might want to consider here is knight d3, but then you drop your pawn on c4 and you'll get the pawn c5 back, but then you're not having winning chances anymore. and he goes knight takes c5. And I quickly, before we look at the game, I quickly want to point out there was the slightly better move, knight takes f7, because after queen takes f7, there was queen d8 check, and you win the knight back. But it's very unclear, as there is both pawns will be lost in the line, and white will be up a pawn, but it will not be so clear as it's not a passed pawn. And it might still result in a draw, but it was a very nice tactic, that's for sure.
Yeah, you love to see how many tactical patterns one can find, even in a position that doesn't have many pieces on the board. Wow, speaking of
96.
tactical patterns, goodness me.
Knight e6, what a move by Hikaru.
Knight e6, both queens are hanging. So if knight takes f6, knight takes c7, and if the knight is taken, then he will take, wait a second, how is the line? He will take on g6, knight g7.
After f takes e6, let's have a look. I believe there is, okay, so after, the players did not believe the line.
They went for different lines, so we need to analyze the knight endgame, because it's only a minute left for Maxim Matlakov, 2 minutes for Hikaru, and the passed pawn, that c passed pawn, is hard to stop.
Right, and yeah, you're currently, the problem is that wherever you want to go with your knight, there's a knight waiting for you, so you can't go there, and that makes it really difficult for the knights to move around. But we see that the c pawn got captured actually, and now it should be very difficult for Hikaru to find a way to win this, because with the pawns on one side of the board, at one point we might see all the pawns being traded off, and then one of the knights takes the last pawn of white, and that's it. But there's definitely like some chances here for white to play on. You never know what's going to happen.
For the time being, the way it is, Hikaru having an extra pawn and time advantage, he can play on forever. And
that
for
too.
Matlakov, this is difficult to defend, even if he objectively should be holding. With only 43 seconds on the clock, I don't think he will find it. Now knight takes f5.
Oh my goodness, knight takes f5 indeed. He dropped knight takes f5, and now the knight and the pawn, they're both covering this knight on e4. But the problem is that both of the pieces will be removed now. And the problem here is that after king takes, there's g4 check, and I will take your knight back over there. And now I'm guessing even king e3 is enough to win. Yeah, king e3
indeed.
After takes, g4, you take the pawns are being taken off the board. After king takes e4, you have a winning pawn endgame. We see resignation. What a beautiful conversion by Hikaru.
Yeah, it was a really, really difficult situation for Matlakov, as we mentioned, even if it was objectively holdable, not with 43 seconds on the clock against Hikaru. With the time advantage, an extra pawn is going to put even more pressure on you. And look at that celebration. Almost, I think it's a bit of a delay. He's still playing the game in our face cam. We are time traveling.
Yeah, he made a beautiful conversion there, a very unexpected one. Sadly, it was very difficult for Matlakov to defend that anymore, especially being low on the clock as well. So definitely very understandable in that sense. And now we are moved on. There's still a few games going on in this round. We see Jocelyn playing against Dropstone. I don't remember who.
David Paravian. He has played many times and qualified actually quite many times. So it has been a very consistent qualification oftentimes for Dropstone. But Jospep too is not a new player to our chess.com events. Of course, many of you are following his channel as well as a streamer.
Absolutely. And we see that the players are playing on as both players are very low on time. Typically, they would resign this position, obviously. But since there's no increments in this time format, the players play on to the very end to see if they can save a point, maybe a half point at least. But Paravian was able to convert this very easily.
And with that win, good chances for Paravian and no longer any chance for Jostam, unfortunately, to make it to the top 8. There's only one more round to go before we head to our final round. Let's take a look at what's coming up in May on chess.com. The Women's Speed Chess Championship is returning for this year again with a prize fund of $70,000. Some of the top female players of the world will be competing. This is a collaboration event between FIDE and chess.com, and it's going to be the most important online tournament for titled female players in the world. So make sure to tune in. 70K on the line starting in May, the Women's Speed Chess Championship here on chess.com.
Wow, what an amazing event, Anna. I'm really looking forward to that event.
Me too. Of course, I'm very biased, but I don't want to compete, but I always root for fellow former opponents and friends of mine. So always friends and former opponents, many of them, the participants.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you there. I would do the same. But yeah, we're almost at the last round is almost getting started. The players are getting ready for the last round, and there is a lot of stake for the players as we are heading into the very final round of this event today, because the top 8 once again qualifies for the knockout tomorrow. And we see that a couple of players are well, Anish is in the top 8 right now, but he is placed 8th literally, so he's not safe yet, and there's still some players behind him following very closely.
Yeah, including Dropstone, David Paravian, who has just won his game against Jospem. So if David Paravian can win yet another game on demand, he might be qualifying depending on the other results. No, actually, I guess it would be if he wins, but he has to beat Arjun Erigaisi in this game where he's got the white pieces. I think he will certainly try. He has to win, and the other results, we shall see who is matched up against who. The pairings, I believe some of the 5.5 point players are facing each other, and of course, even the top places matter, because as we said, the higher the seed you are, the more games you get with the white pieces tomorrow for the knockout.
Exactly. And the games have started already. I see that Paravian is playing against Arjun, and we see a crazy line in the French. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this, Anna, but let's have a look how this position started with, because obviously we should be familiar with it, right?
Oh yeah, of course. I know the French. No, I know the lines I play, but there's so many rich and complex lines in the French defense. I have studied some of these positions. It often leads to opposite side castlings. If we roll further to see what happened in this game. Oh, G5. Okay.
G5.
No, I don't play this, but it looks amazing. I need to learn it.
Exactly. I was about to say the same, because as you were explaining us very well how the system works for the knockouts, there was G5 on the board, and I was shocked to see, because I have not seen this move before, and it looks very dangerous. But it was just a straightforward idea that you want to distract this pawn on F4, and if takes, there's obviously the pawn E5 going to be lost. So that's why you do not want to take, because this pawn E5 matters a lot in the French. We both know, Anna, this pawn, if you can get rid of this pawn, you're doing great with the black pieces.
Yeah, at the same time, it's such an aggressive and risky move. G5 is to tear wide open the king side where you normally would castle. So after knight to F3, there's lots of questions to answer. What do you trade? Where do you capture? What's the right move order? And I think both players are playing for a win with such a risky choice of opening D4 now, which is a baby fork, but that pawn can be taken. So knight takes, so bishop takes D4 will eliminate the pawn.
Right, that is exactly what happened in the game. G takes f4, and then long castle, as you mentioned, would probably happen. Knight takes e5, queen takes f4, knight g6, and after queen d2, there's e5. And this is the live position the players are playing right now. What is going on? So the black king is still in the center. You would probably want to short castle at some point, but you're not in the biggest rush because there's not a big threat going on right now. And the only player that is actually being threatened right now is the white knight, actually. So that's why it retreated, and we see a queen trade, and that actually might benefit black here as first of all, I like the placement of the bishop on a7. It's a very sneaky place for the bishop, but also because obviously black has a pair of bishops, and it feels like black has some a lot of play here.
I agree with you that bishop is amazing. The light square bishop 2 of black will definitely come into play shortly. So if anyone has a good chance here, it's Arjun. And that's bad news for David Paravian, drops down with the white pieces. Shall we take a look at some of the top boards as well, even though they already, I guess, mathematically qualified, although you don't really want to be losing in the last round and chance it, right? So no one will go very risky among the 6-point players. They want to keep their seeding.
I'm trying to pull up one of the top games, Anna, but they do not want me to show the top games before you.
Wait,
they're not very kind to me.
It is possible that some of them have finished already.
Oh, you're absolutely, yeah, you're right.
I'm not sure. I'm just asking. Like
you're actually, I didn't even notice before. I thought we were looking at we were looking at their last round, but I thought the games were still loading. The game's already finished.
I thought we had a mistake because I saw the number 9 next to the points, and I was like, no, they cannot be. We only played 8 rounds. All of those games, Anna-Maya, all of the players in the top 8 have finished their last round with an early draw. Now, this is what you call a super grandmaster move. You secure your qualification, and you don't mind that you're going to be called boring because they want to make sure that they get that cash and participation tomorrow. So all of them, every single one of them secured their spot already.
You would say so, but I think the players with 5.5 points are still in slight trouble because there is we're looking right now at the game that matters a lot as
David Paravian's game, Dropstone. Yeah, Dropstone can still catch them. And the players on 4.5 depends on the tie breaks. So yes, you're right, Anna-Maya, that the players on 5.5 points are taking a bit of a chance. Maybe not the players with the better tiebreak scores, as we see Maxim Madlakov and Grishuk having really good tiebreak scores, as well as Vidit, to be fair, on 19 at the moment. But for Anish,
it is worrying indeed, and we see Arjun also being able to catch up perhaps. So let's have a quick look at how Arjun is doing, because his game, or actually not Arjun, this is Arjun's game, I mean Raunak, another great young star from India. He is also a big chance to qualify. Let me see if I can pull up his game. We have to stay to this game, and I can't get it.
This is the only game we can watch. It's okay. It matters. This game matters a lot. It matters a lot because both Arjun and Rigaisi here with the black pieces and Dropstone, David Paravian with the white pieces, they both could qualify and potentially knock out players like Anish Giri out of the top 8, depending on the result in this game and depending on, of course, then the tiebreak calculations. So this is not confirmed what's going to happen in case there's a decisive result. But I'm just curious to see what's going to happen, first of all, with black's very active rooks on the D and C file. It looks like white is actually in trouble. How do you not lose a piece here?
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of tension going on, and it's the power of those bishops as well as the rooks. They're controlling so many squares, and it makes it so difficult for white to mobilize their pieces, to coordinate them well. And that's why Dropzone is spending so much time. He's down to 3 minutes. He knows he is, if not for winning, he knows he has to at least make a draw. He can't lose this game. So he knows there's so much at stake, and he's being really careful by playing b3. But now after rook c5, you would say that this knight is trapped on a5.
Yes, certainly. And if you push b4, then the idea of
the same
b3
trick
is gone. Rook takes c4.
So apparently, there is a crazy line that goes like this. You go knight c3. Seems
So
like the
when-
most normal move, right?
Yeah, because when the knight is taken, what's going on? You take
I
on
will show-
e6, rook
I
takes
was
d1,
only
rook takes
being
d1, and there's rook d7 check at the end, picking up
Yes,
the
you got
e7
it.
bishop.
You
Oh,
got it. So
goodness
let me
me.
show it to the audience. I was only being sarcastic, Anna. Don't worry. Rook takes d1, rook takes d1, and after rook takes a5, you take on e6. Oh, yeah, let me take it like that. F takes e6, and now rook d7 check, and we are doing fine. And yeah, black should actually be worried about not losing their rook over here. So this is why this line must be played. But will Paravian see this? I am not sure. He doesn't have so much time left anymore, so it might be very difficult.
Yeah, that's a hard one to notice. Knight c3, leaving the knight hanging. But he might have to find it. He's taking his time. Now, unfortunately, wait a second. Has a move happened? Because I see.
Oh yeah,
I'm taking
because we refreshed, the moves didn't update. But I'm just seeing right now that knight c3 has been played indeed. He found the move, and we see rook takes d1, rook takes. We see exactly what we are analyzing. But instead of taking back, Arjun goes for the beautiful move, bishop d4, stopping the rook from entering on the 7th rank. What a beautiful defense.
Yeah, now it is attacking the knight on c3, and the bishop on e6 is finally fully hanging with only 1 minute and 20 seconds left for David Paravian. This is such a hard game for Dropstone David Paravian that is to defend. As you said, he needs at least half a point.
Absolutely. Knight b1, rook a4. The game is still it can still end in 3 results. Okay, maybe 2. Maybe we should not be so ambitious about White's position, as White's development is not the greatest. However, I feel like there are some chances here for White, if not to make a draw at least.
Yeah, I certainly agree that position-wise, White does have the chances, but when it comes to the time management, I'm really worried for David Paravian. Only 1 minute versus 7 minutes, nearly a full 7 minutes for Arjun Erigaisi.
Yeah, that is gonna hurt a lot for David Paravian, because he will have a very difficult time, not only to survive the 1 minute, but to make the best out of this in such a short time. It's gonna be very difficult.
Yeah, I think as impressive as it is that David Paravian has found all the tactical patterns to save that position where it looked like he was gonna lose material, he managed to find it. He's escaping, but in terms of the time situation, he could lose a time. It's true that the position has simplified though, so it is going to be easier for him now to find the right moves, but it's not a dead draw position. So Erigaisi with the black pieces will play on.
Absolutely. And now we might see a lot of pieces being traded off. Okay, I was going to say we might see the bishop being traded off now, but he goes for bishop e3, saves the bishop as well as the rook now, and it feels like white is actually slowly coming back, because now the bishop will either stay on d5, or whenever they feel like they can go to f3, and slowly this knight will also activate from a3, go to a3, to go to c4, and it's not so clear what black's plan is now. c3 was an amazing move by David Paravian.
Yeah, he is fighting so well. And as we mentioned, he has been a very consistent player in the Rapid Chess Championship. Often he has played many weekends and he has qualified many weekends. So he's here to fight and try to knock out Anish Giri from the qualification spot.
Absolutely, this might get really close. And as wait a second, I just blinked, and what is happening right now?
Black is apparently winning, so there's tactics. The tactics.
There's a lot of things going on right here. I believe the problem is right now that after knight takes and rook, oh, he did not take on d5. Okay, so let me show you real quick. After knight takes d5, rook takes d5. I believe the winning. It's as simple as you just play bishop e1, take on d2 all the way, and you have two outside passed pawns, and you can't stop both of them. I think it's that simple.
That must have been the reason, but it was missed. Even if it was missed, David Pravin is down to 12 seconds. So unfortunately,
I think that's why. I think that's why Arjun is careless about this and just plays very safe and solid moves to not mess up right away. He does not need to go for this line if he's winning on the clock very easily. But okay, you never know.
Funnily enough, even here the position says equal because even though black is up a piece, once you move the rook f5 check will win the piece back. The knight on f4 will be hanging. So Paravian is holding on to this position when it comes to defending on the board, but he's gonna lose on time in the next few moves.
Yeah, that will hurt a lot, and it will be a great win for Arjun, but David Paravian, he just needed that little bit more time on the clock. If he had that time, he would be able to survive, but unfortunately he goes down and Arjun advances, and we're not sure yet if he advances to the top 8, but he has scored 5.5 points. Let's have a look if we can actually switch to the other game. That would be amazing, but we have to take a look here as the system is saying nope, you're not going anywhere.
They really want us to analyze this, but it's confirmed Arjun Erigasi wins. We will need to take a look at the tiebreak points, so we will need a confirmation soon on what's going to happen with the players on 5.5 points, and also if we could see the game of Ronak Sadvani, so that is Champ 2005.
Okay, let's have a quick look. We're trying to get the game back up. Okay, we have to switch for a second.
Yeah, I think we're just gonna for a moment look at you guys and thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for spending another weekend in our company, whether it's Anime and me or the regulars. You know, there's Danya, Robert, Yasser, so many amazing casters. Speaking of them, I think you will see some of them tomorrow for the Sunday knockout. But I truly want to thank everyone for showing up all the time. This is already week 12 and you guys keep coming back. Thank you for watching the Rapid Chess Championship. We hope you enjoy it. And we're going to figure out now what's happening, or at least the result of Champ 2005. 5.5 points. Also,
he has won his game.
He won, meaning that he ties for the 8th place, but he might not have the right tiebreak point. We will take 100% verification on that as soon as we can. But from what we see right now, it would mean that Anish Giri makes it. Arjun and Ronak will not, if the tie breaks that I see now are correct.
We will have to make sure that everything is correct, but for now there's still one game going on. Ronak won his final game, so he might still have a chance, but as you mentioned, Anish might have the better tie breaks, but we're still awaiting confirmation. Obviously, we have to wait until this game is over to confirm this for sure. So let's see how it's going between Anton Demchenko and do you remember the name of the player with the black pieces?
Grandmaster Jimabayev, I believe.
Okay.
And so this doesn't count for the top 8, but remember that there are Grand Prix points for also the other places. There's lots of Grand Prix points overall at stake, also for the players that don't qualify. So when it comes to prices and Grand Prix points, they always will be fighting also on boards like this one, where they are on 3 points and 3.5 in the event. Not top 8, but cash prices and Grand Prix points are important. So with that, checkmate on the board. It popped up on top of an E4 pawn checkmate. I was like, don't cover it. Please don't censor that checkmate.
I thought we were having a draw here, which is why the game ended. But it's a checkmate. I did not see that coming. I completely did not see this.
Yeah, it came out of the blue. We just replayed the last few moves very quickly.
Yeah, let's have a look what actually happened. So knight d5 was played, rook h2 check. I mean, it's obvious that black is winning here, as the h pawn will promote sometime soon. It's just a much better position. White is not able to do much over here. And after king d2, rook f2, it's a direct problem. You're just losing this pawn. You can't defend it anymore. F4 is one of the ways to try to save the pawn, or at least try to find some play here. But it's met by e4, which is one of the most beautiful checkmates we've seen today.
Yeah, a lovely pawn checkmate. Funny that it was censored by our tournament is over banner, but meaning that the tournament is over, we have our final standings. Hikaru Nakamura wins today's event together with Janja Pomyashi on the exact same tiebreaker. We'll need to figure out what's the second tiebreaker for the seeding, but both of them make it to tomorrow's knockout, obviously. And on third place, we have Abdusattorov Nodirbek, chess warrior, Amin Tabatabai, Grishuk, Billy Kimba being Maxim Matlakov, Vidit Gujarati, that's Vidit Chess, and Anish Giri. That is the top 8, the players that are qualifying to tomorrow's knockout stage. If any of the players cannot play tomorrow, then the 9th, 10th, 11th, and so on player will get invited too. So depending on how many of the players in the top 8 cannot play, if they cannot, there will be a chance also for the players in 9th and 10th place.
Absolutely amazing. And we are just being told that on the second tie break, Jan is the one on the first place. So yeah, it's just a tiny difference, but it's congratulations to the top 8 advancing to the knockout tomorrow. Really excited to see those matches and see who is going to be the winner of this week's Rapid Chess Championship.
Indeed, and do not go anywhere. We're going to take a very quick break, but when we are back, we'll bring you the rapid recap of the day. We'll need to think with Anna Maya in this short break, which game are we choosing, because there have been so many exciting ones. So stay tuned, don't go anywhere, quick break, and then we are back with the best or most interesting game of the day.
See you in a bit.
This is going to be a real-time breakdown of Danny Wrench's games all time on chess.com.
That's cool. Oh! In the last month, I am playing 83.12.
I'm less accurate than them in every stage.
Yeah.
Man, That stings a little
You
bit.
should
Okay.
do the more game review.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so
Tuesday sucks. I gotta stop playing chess on Tuesday. Oh, it's because it's Title Tuesday.
Look how many blunders there were back in December 2020. And now December 2021, 1,600. Don't look at this number. look at this number. Best.
Let's go to tactics. Mates. Probably need to work on these ones. Yep.
Every single rook fork that has presented itself to me, I have found. No one has a higher percentage of rook forks than I do. Yes, correct.
These are literally the knight forks that you missed.
I missed knight d6.
You saw it just now.
What the is wrong with me?
I could have done here and then taken this pawn, and I'm winning because my pawns get held together. That's probably the coolest part about this feature.
Like these positions against Hess. Rook there for rook e2. And he blunders mid in one. Oh my goodness. I'm awful.
Welcome back, everyone. We have just witnessed an amazing, excellent, and always very exciting day of action. But there's one more thing to do, and that is the Coinbase rapid recap of the day. Anna Maya, which game have we chosen out of the many, many exciting ones?
Yes, Anna, we had a lot of exciting, amazing games, a lot of sharp games, tactics flying left and right, end games being blundered from winning positions to losing or making a draw in the end. But there was one game that was sticking out, and it was Anish Giri against Arjun Erigaisi. Anish Giri from the Netherlands and Arjun from India. Anish played a fantastic game, and before we spoil what actually happened, let's have a look at the game, starting with e4, followed by c5, knight f3, e6, a very nice Sicilian, followed by c3, taking it easy, followed by knight f6, e5, and knight d5. And what do you think of this line, Anna?
It was a very smart choice by Anish. He went for knight f3, which is, of course, the most common move against the Sicilian defense, but then he quickly transposed to the Alapin by pushing c3 on move 3. So a slight change of mover there. He might have caught Arjun a little bit off guard. He didn't expect the Alapin from Anish. It's not his main opening. And now, of course, the usual line, d4, white pushes the central pawn, supports the e5 pawn. A trade happened on d4. C takes, and d6. This is all very common in the Alapin. Bishop c4. We see the normal development of white as well as the normal development of black with bishop e7.
Indeed, and it is being followed by short castle, all very normal, very solid, and very typical approach to this position. Now we see queen e2 followed by b6 with the idea obviously to play bishop b7. So that is also what happened. Rook d1, bishop b7, and both players are trying to develop their pieces and create a nice position for themselves.
And speaking of trade, bishop takes d5 is a move I wasn't aware of, but Anish must have had this all very well analyzed because he was playing really quick this stage of the game. So not a new idea, but for Anish, a very well developed and analyzed idea. It feels like Black doesn't take back with the bishop, probably because of knight c3 coming with a tempo. So instead, Black captured on d5 with the pawn, blocking the diagonal of the bishop and doubling the pawns, but possibly thinking that it's going to be fine because the d6 pawn will be traded for the e5 pawn at some point, right, Anna-Maya? At some point, it's going to be traded.
Absolutely. And what is really important to note here is that Arjun spent a lot of time on this move, e takes d5, which clearly states that he was not ready for this move. He did not see this coming. So it was definitely a surprise for him. We see Anish following this up with knight c3, knight a6, which may look a little bit odd, but it's clear that he wants to transfer the knight through c7 to e6, and as well support the pawn on d5.
And it also helps him after knight b5, which was Anish's move. It's a very strong position for the knight, putting pressure on d6. He immediately challenges it with knight to c7. But that's a trade that Anish wanted. He trades the two knights, leaving only the pair of bishops for Black. But it's not the type of position where you want to have the bishops. And he even now points it out by going bishop g5. So he's offering a trade between the dark squared bishop, and what remains on the board is a knight that is better in this position than the light squared bishop of Black, which is blocked by the d5 pawn.
Absolutely. You're making a really good point there, Anna. And we're seeing that Arjun follows this up by playing d takes e5, trying to open it up for this bishop on b7. And we see Anish replying it with d takes e5. And after rook a e8, you might think this pawn on e5 is in slight trouble. But here comes the counterattack by Anish, queen d3, threatening checkmate on h7.
And after g6, you would think that the problem is already sorted. No, he insists. He says queen h3, checkmate again. So now Arjun started thinking again for quite some time, h5 is the natural move, and he ends up playing it, but he was also considering whether to push the f pawn. f6 or f5 would also guard the pawn through the 7th rank.
Absolutely, and he goes for h5, and Anish follows this up with an amazing move, e6. It's not only distracting and destroying this pawn chain that is what Black was trying to create, but also creating even more space for the white pieces. So Black follows it up with f6, trying to create more counterplay. But after knight f3, it is clear that this knight is superior over this bishop on b7, as we see after queen f4, Arjun trying to make it complicated and trying to be more active than Anish is trying to push him for. But after knight d4, it is clear this knight is amazing on d4.
A very well placed knight, blocking that isolated pawn of Black and making that bishop very passive. Arjun tries to put pressure on the e6 pawn by playing bishop to c8, which is the most challenging move. I believe he is doing well, but Anish doesn't stop making the most efficient and forceful moves on the board. Instead of trying to hold on to the e6 pawn, he just says, queen d3, you also have a weakness on g6.
Absolutely, and Arjun is trying to defend it by playing queen e4, offering the trade of queens, because obviously once the queens are off the board, Arjun will have a much easier time dealing with the position, which is why Anish goes for queen d2, and after rook e7, we see the move f4.
f4 is a really strong move. And first I was like, when Arjun played g5, but what is he doing? g5 allows f5. You're just helping white get that dream pawn structure. And e6, passed pawn, defended. It's in the stomach of Black's position. But if it wasn't for g5, if we just roll back that move, Anna-Maya, the queen on e4 is about to be trapped. The threat is rook to e1, and the queen has nowhere to go. It's incredible.
Indeed, we were shocked that g5 was played because it's not a very logical move. But upon seeing that the queen is in the middle of center, completely trapped, Arjun was forced to play g5 to free up some space for the queen. And after f5, it is completely clear that white has completely dominated all the black pieces. The queen has still a lot of squares to go to, but it is not able to do much on its own.
Yeah, Arjun tried by moving the queen to g4, but after knight c6, rook c7, queen takes d5, now that pawn has dropped, threatening e7 check, discover check, so king g7 was played, and after queen d6, it is clearly visible that white's position is dominant. Black had to offer a queen trade after queen d6 to try to release some of that pressure.
Indeed, and it was now that Anish decided to go for the queen trade as his position is still phenomenal. And obviously this does not make Arjun's situation much easier as he's forced to ruin his pawn structure even further. Now after rook ac1, king h6, knight b4, Anish is simply improving his position, and his next move is probably going to be knight d5 and support this pawn to push it even further.
Yeah, the engine was a bit critical of knight b4, but in winning positions, often there's many ways of winning. So for the engine b4, b5 to squeeze even more space out of the position was very strong. But knight b4, knight d5, I think to the human eye and to the super grandmaster like Anish Giri is very strong and efficient. So after knight b4, rook g7 was played, knight to d5, f3, an attempt to try something on the g5, but g3, no mouse slip with g4, and Anish is fine after h4, king f2. It is actually the black king that will be in trouble, Anamaya, isn't it?
Indeed, we will see in a couple of moves why. Let's have a look. Bishop b7 was played, trying to eliminate that really disturbing knight on d5, which was followed by the beautiful rook c4. It's attacking the pawn on h4, so you have to deal with that. Obviously, Arjun takes on g3, h takes g3, and after rook d8, Anna, how was the game finished in the really beautiful way?
It was, of course, impeccable conversion, starting with rook h1 check, and after king g5. Who cares that the knight is hanging on d5, says Anish Giri, and pushes g4. Such a subtle pawn move, threatening rook h5 check, and there's nothing black can do.
Indeed, and that is checkmate. What a beautiful ending and what a beautiful technique we have seen from Anish, taking down Arjun and eventually giving him the ticket to the knockout stage of this tournament.
Indeed, that was a very important point for Anish Giri to qualify, and that concludes our Coinbase Rapid Recap of the day. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you also enjoyed our broadcast, our coverage of the Saturday Swiss Anime. Thank you so much for joining me. Wait a second, I'm not saying goodbye yet because we have the pictures. We've got the bracket. This is what's happening tomorrow. I believe Grandmaster Jeffrey Zhang is returning tomorrow for commentary with Grandmaster Robert Hess, if I'm not confusing the information. I love to see Jeffrey on the casting team as well, a very strong player who often competes in the Rapid Chess Championship, but tomorrow he will be one of your hosts.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to that, Anna, as well. It was such a pleasure commentating with you, Anna. It was our first time, actually, and I think it went fantastic. I had a wonderful time. And yeah, thank you so much for making this a great experience.
Thank you so much to you, Anna Maya. As I said, double Anna show, matching chairs. This was meant to be. This was meant to be. And I hope there will be many more to come. Thanks so much again to our audience as well, both on YouTube and Twitch and on Facebook and on Twitter. There's so many platforms where you can follow us and also check out the recap videos, the highlights on the chess.com YouTube channel. There's many YouTube channels that you need to follow. Chess.com has plenty too. So make sure to head over to YouTube as well if you're not already on YouTube. Having said that, thanks so much again, Anna Maya. Thanks so much to the team behind the scenes. And we hope to see you guys tomorrow for the Sunday knockout of the Rapid Chess Championship. thank you again. I said thank you a lot of times, and I'm really grateful.
Me too, Anna. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Thank you so much to the producer, Matt, for helping us out, and also for chess.com for supporting us with a lot of the fun facts that we could provide to you guys. Thank you so much to everyone. Yeah, for sure. Spenny did a great, fantastic job. Thank you so much. We are signing off from here. Hope to see you tomorrow back on this channel with the knockout portion of this amazing event. Tomorrow we will see who will be the winner of this week's Rapid Chess Championship.
Thank you so much.